Hi guys, tonight we step softly into a world long before modern borders where the air carries the faint scent of dry earth and distant fires, and the sky stretches wide over ancient lands that would one day be called Persia. You find yourself standing on a quiet plain at dusk, the light fading into gentle shades of amber and violet. Somewhere nearby, a small settlement hums quietly with life, the low murmur of voices blending with the crackle of a fire. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights and let yourself step forward into this slow unfolding story. You begin walking along a worn path, your feet brushing against fine dust that has been shaped by countless travellers before you. The land around you feels ancient in a way that is hard to describe, not old in a forgotten sense, but layered, as if each step carries the weight of many lives, many stories quietly resting beneath the surface. Before we move deeper into this world, it helps to understand where you are in time. You are somewhere in the early formation of what historians would later call one of the first great empires in human history. Around the 6th century BCE, the Achaemenid Empire began to take shape under rulers like Cyrus the Great, stretching across vast regions from the eastern Mediterranean to parts of Central Asia. This was not just a political structure, it was a system of connection. Roads, governance, communication, all carefully maintained in ways that feel surprisingly familiar even today. In fact, one widely accepted historical detail is that the Persian royal road allowed messages to travel remarkably quickly across the empire, using relay stations and mounted couriers. You might imagine it as an ancient version of overnight delivery, though perhaps with a bit more dust and fewer tracking notifications. As you walk, you notice how the environment reflects this organization. Small markers line the path, simple but purposeful. In the distance, you see figures moving steadily, traders perhaps, or messengers carrying information from one region to another. The air carries faint hints of spices, leather and smoke blending into something both earthy and comforting. And yet even in this early moment there are layers of complexity. Some historians suggest that the success of the Persian Empire came not just from military strength, but from its ability to allow diverse cultures to coexist under a broader system. Others remain unconvinced, arguing that this tolerance may have been more strategic than philosophical. Either way, you can sense that something unusual is happening here. You pass by a small group gathered near a fire. Their clothing is simple woven fabrics that feel coarse but warm. One person tends to the flames, adjusting pieces of wood with quiet care. Another speaks softly, telling a story that seems to blend memory and myth. You do not need to understand every word to feel its rhythm. A lesser-known detail, one that often surprises people, is that the Persian Empire allowed many local customs and religions to continue rather than forcing a single identity. This approach created a kind of quiet stability, though it also required careful balance. Imagine managing a vast network of different traditions without the benefit of modern communication tools. No instant messages, no shared global language, just patient structure and an understanding of human nature. The ground beneath your feet feels cool now as night settles in. The temperature drops gently and you pull your imagined cloak a little closer. Somewhere in the distance, an animal calls out its sound, echoing briefly, before fading into silence. You might find yourself wondering how people in this time understood the world beyond their immediate surroundings. Without maps as we know them, without satellite images or even consistent written records in many regions, their sense of geography was shaped by stories, trade routes, and lived experience. And yet, despite these limitations, the Persian Empire managed to connect regions that had previously remained isolated from one another. Goods moved, ideas moved, even ways of thinking began to shift. It is easy to overlook how significant this is, especially from a modern perspective where global connection feels almost automatic. As you continue walking, the path begins to rise slightly, leading you to a gentle overlook. From here you can see the faint outline of a larger settlement. Small lights flicker in the distance, likely oil lamps or fires burning steadily through the night. The scene feels calm, almost timeless. This is where something important begins to take root. Not just power or territory, but identity, a sense of continuity that will persist through centuries of change, invasion, transformation, and renewal. Researchers continue to question how much of this early identity was consciously shaped by the leaders, and how much emerged naturally from the people themselves. Was it designed, or did it simply grow over time like a tree finding its own direction? You take a slow breath, noticing the dryness of the air, the subtle texture of dust against your skin, the faint warmth still lingering from the day. And in this quiet moment you begin to understand that this is not just the story of a place, it is the story of how a civilization learns to see itself, how it carries that sense of selfhood even when everything around it changes. That quiet persistence, that ability to adapt without fully losing what came before, will shape everything that follows. It will influence how this land interacts with distant powers, how it remembers past alliances and conflicts, and how it responds to new relationships that have not yet even been imagined. For now, though, the night remains calm. The firelight flickers gently in the distance. The road stretches onward, inviting you to keep moving step by step into the long and layered history ahead. You continue along the path, the ground beneath your feet becoming smoother, more deliberate, as if shaped not just by time but by intention. The faint glow of distant fires slowly fades behind you, replaced by the quiet rhythm of travel. The night air feels cooler now, brushing gently against your skin, carrying with it the subtle scent of dry grass and distant stone. As your eyes adjust to the dim light, you begin to notice something different about the road itself. It is no longer just a simple path worn by footsteps. It feels structured, maintained, almost guided. This is part of a much larger network, one of the defining features of the Persian world you have stepped into. To understand what you are walking on, it helps to pause for a moment in history. During the height of the Achaemenid Empire, especially under Darius I, a system of roads was carefully developed to connect vast regions of the empire. The most famous of these was the Royal Road, stretching roughly 2,500 kilometers from Sardis in Anatolia to Susa in Persia. It allowed communication, trade, and administration to function with surprising efficiency for its time. As you walk, you can almost sense the echoes of that system at work. Every so often you pass a simple structure, perhaps a relay station or resting point. A small fire burns outside, tended by a lone figure wrapped in layered cloth. The faint crackle of wood feels comforting in the stillness. A widely accepted historical fact is that mounted couriers along these routes could carry messages across the empire in a matter of days, far faster than ordinary travellers. It is easy to imagine the quiet urgency of those riders moving through night and day, passing information that shaped decisions far beyond what they could see. You pause near one of these stations, noticing the details. The ground here is packed more firmly, worn by hooves and sandals alike. A water container rests near the entrance, its surface cool to the touch. Inside you can hear the soft murmur of voices, low and steady, like a conversation that has no need to rush. And you might find yourself wondering how such a system was maintained across such vast distances. Some historians suggest that the Persian administration developed an early form of standardized governance, with regional officials ensuring that road stations and communication systems remained functional. Others question how consistent this system truly was, especially in more remote areas where central control may have been weaker. Either way, as you stand here, it feels remarkably organized for a world without modern technology. No digital networks, no instant updates. Yet somehow information still flowed on. A lesser-known detail adds a quiet layer of intrigue. Along these roads, travellers often carried not just goods but stories. News of distant lands, unfamiliar customs, even rumours of strange events would move from one region to another. In a way, these roads were not just physical connections but cultural ones. Imagine hearing about a place thousands of kilometers away described only through the words of someone who'd been there. You resume walking, the soft crunch of earth beneath your feet blending with the distant sounds of movement. Somewhere ahead, you hear the faint rhythm of hooves, steady and controlled. A rider approaches, their silhouette barely visible against the dim horizon. They pass you without stopping, focused, carrying something unseen, but clearly important. The moment feels brief, but it lingers. These roads are shaping something deeper than simple travel. They are creating familiarity between distant places, slowly building a shared awareness that stretches across the empire. Today we might take for granted the idea of global connection. Messages cross continents in seconds, information is constantly updated, refined, shared. But here in this quiet ancient world, connection feels more deliberate, more human. It takes time, effort, and trust. You notice how the land begins to change slightly as you move forward. The terrain shifts from open plains to more structured areas where small settlements appear at regular intervals. Each one feels connected to the road as if its existence depends on this steady flow of movement. A small group sits near the edge of the one such settlement sharing a meal. The smell of cooked grains and herbs drifts gently through the air. Their conversation is calm, punctuated by soft laughter and long pauses. There is no sense of urgency here, only the quiet rhythm of daily life. And yet beneath that calm, the larger system continues to operate. Goods are exchanged, messages are passed, decisions made in distant centres slowly ripple outward, reaching places like this in ways that are almost invisible. Researchers continue to question how much these connections influence the identity of the people living here. Did they begin to see themselves as part of something larger, something beyond their immediate surroundings? Or did local identities remain stronger, with the empire existing more as a distant framework than a personal reality? You take another slow breath, noticing the coolness of the night settling more deeply now. The stars above feel sharper, clearer, stretching endlessly across the sky. Without the distractions of modern light, the night feels fuller, more present. As you walk, you begin to understand that these roads are not just physical structures. They are pathways of influence. They shape how ideas move, how cultures interact, how relationships form and evolve over time. This quiet network, built with intention and care, will leave a lasting imprint. It will influence how Persia and later Iran understands connection with the outside world. The balance between openness and caution, between exchange and protection. You pass another marker along the road, its surface worn smooth by years of touch and weather. It stands quietly, a small but steady reminder that you're part of a much larger journey. The path continues ahead, stretching into the darkness, inviting you to keep moving forward. And as you do, the sense of connection lingers. Not loud or overwhelming, but steady and persistent, like the soft rhythm of footsteps on a well-travelled road. The road carries you onward, and after a time the steady rhythm of footsteps begins to feel almost meditative. The air has grown cooler still, and a faint breeze moves across the land, brushing gently against your face. Somewhere far off you hear the low crackle of a fire, and the soft murmur of voices carried just enough to remind you that you are not alone in this vast, quiet world. As the path curves slightly, you begin to notice something different in the atmosphere. There is a sense of intention here, not just in the structure of the road, but in the way people gather, the way they pause, the way they seem to look inward as much as outward. Before stepping deeper into this moment, it helps to understand an important part of early Persian life. Religion and belief were not separate from daily existence. They shaped how people understood the world, how they treated one another, and how rulers justified their authority. One widely recognized historical fact is that Zoroastrianism, one of the world's earliest monotheistic religions, played a significant role in shaping Persian thought, especially during the Achaemenid period and beyond. You begin to walk toward a small open space where a group has gathered. At the center, a fire burns steadily, its light soft and consistent rather than wild or uncontrolled. The flames seem almost ceremonial, tended with care, as if their presence carries meaning beyond simple warmth. The smell reaches you first, dry wood faintly sweet mixed with the subtle scent of ash. It is comforting in a quiet way. You sit near the edge of the gathering, feeling the gentle heat against your skin. No one rushes to speak. There is a calmness here, a shared understanding that does not require constant words. Zoroastrian belief emphasized concepts like truth order and the constant choice between good and evil. It framed life as a kind of ongoing balance where each action contributed to a larger moral structure. This might sound familiar in a modern sense, though at the time it offered a structured way to interpret the uncertainties of existence, and you might find yourself wondering how such beliefs influenced the empire itself. Did they encourage fairness in governance, or were they simply adapted to support those already in power? Scholars remain divided on how deeply these religious ideas shaped actual political decisions. Some suggest that rulers genuinely attempted to align their leadership with these principles, promoting justice and order. Others argue that the connection between belief and governance was more symbolic, a way to reinforce authority rather than guide it. As the firelight flickers gently, you notice small details around you. The texture of woven garments, slightly rough but carefully made. The way people sit close enough to share warmth but with a quiet respect for personal space. A child leans against an older figure, eyes half closed, listening to a soft voice telling what seems to be a familiar story. A lesser-known detail about Zoroastrian practice is the importance placed on fire as a symbol of purity and truth. These fires were often kept burning continuously, carefully maintained as part of religious observance. You might think of it as a kind of living presence, something steady in a world that could often feel uncertain. The fire before you seems to carry that same quiet significance. It does not demand attention, but it holds it. You glance upward, noticing how the stars above mirror the stillness below. Without artificial light, the sky feels closer, more immediate. Each point of light seemed sharp, almost within reach. It is easy to imagine how people in this time might have looked to the sky not just for navigation, but for meaning. In the distance, you hear the faint sound of movement along the road you left behind. The world continues, even as this small gathering remains still. This balance between movement and stillness, between connection and reflection, begins to feel important. It shapes how people understand their place in the world, not just as individuals, but as part of something larger, something that extends across time. You notice how the conversation near the fire shifts gently. Someone speaks of a distant region describing its customs, its food, its landscape. Another listens closely, asking quiet questions. Information moves here just as it does along the roads, but in a more personal way. Researchers continue to question how unified religious belief truly was across the Persian Empire. While Zoroastrianism held influence, many regions maintained their own traditions, creating a layered spiritual landscape. Was there a shared understanding, or simply a coexistence of many beliefs under a single political structure? The answer, like much of history, is not entirely clear. You feel the warmth of the fire against your hands, noticing how it contrasts with the cool air surrounding you. The sensation is grounding, simple and steady. And in that moment you begin to see how belief and identity are quietly forming together. Not through sudden change, but through repetition, through shared practices, through moments like this, where people gather, reflect and continue forward. Today belief often feels more abstract, something discussed rather than lived in daily rhythm. But here it is woven into everything, into the way the fire is tended, into the stories told, into the quiet understanding of right and wrong that guides everyday actions. You stand slowly, feeling the shift from warmth to cool air once more. The road calls you forward again, its presence steady and familiar now. As you step away from the fire, you carry something with you. Not an object, but a sense of continuity, a feeling that this place, this moment is part of a much larger story that will continue to unfold in ways you cannot yet see. The path stretches ahead, gently illuminated by starlight, and you continue walking, the quiet glow of the fire fading behind you, but its presence lingering steady and calm as the journey moves forward. You move onward, the memory of the fire now a soft warmth somewhere behind you, replaced by the gentle rhythm of your steps and the quiet openness of the land. The path begins to feel less settled here, the surface uneven in places, as if it has endured long stretches without careful maintenance. The wind picks up slightly, carrying with it a faint trace of dust and something else, something older, like stone that has been broken and rebuilt many times. As you walk, the sense of calm shifts just a little. Not dramatically, but enough that you notice it. There is a quiet tension in the air, subtle but present, like the feeling of entering a place where many stories overlap. To understand this moment, it helps to pause again in history. After the height of the Achaemenid Empire, Persia experienced a series of invasions and transitions that reshaped its political landscape. One widely accepted historical fact is that Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire in the 4th century BCE, bringing an end to Achaemenid rule and introducing Greek influence into the region. You might expect such a moment to feel loud and overwhelming, but here in this quiet journey it unfolds differently. You notice the remnants first, a broken wall, its stones worn smooth by time, a section of road that seems newer than the surrounding land, built with slightly different materials. These are the small signs of change, the traces left behind when one world blends into another. As you continue, you pass a group of travellers resting near a cluster of rocks. Their clothing looks slightly different from those you saw earlier. The patterns unfamiliar, the cuts of fabric reflecting another tradition. Their language carries a different rhythm too, though you can still sense shared meanings in gestures and tone. This is how change often happens, not as a single moment, but as a gradual blending. Some historians suggest that the arrival of Greek culture brought new ideas, new ways of thinking, particularly in art, philosophy, and governance. Others argue that Persian traditions remain deeply rooted, absorbing these influences rather than being replaced by them. You pause for a moment, watching as one of the travellers carefully pours water into a small cup. The liquid catches the faint light of the sky, reflecting softly. They offer it to another without a word, a simple gesture that feels familiar despite the differences around you. A lesser-known detail from this period is that after Alexander's conquest, many Persian administrative practices were retained because they were simply too effective to discard. Even those who came from distant lands found themselves relying on systems that had been carefully developed over generations. It is a quiet reminder that not everything changes even when power shifts. You begin walking again, the path leading you toward what appears to be the remains of a larger structure. The outline is faint, but visible columns partially standing, others fallen and resting where they landed long ago. The air here feels slightly cooler, as if the stone itself holds onto the memory of past shadows. You run your hand lightly along one of the surfaces. It feels smooth in places, rough in others, shaped by both human effort and the slow work of time. And you might find yourself wondering how people living through these changes understood them. Did they feel a sense of loss watching familiar systems fade? Or did life simply continue adapting as needed, each day blending into the next? Researchers continue to question how deeply these conquests affected everyday life for ordinary people. While political control changed many aspects of daily routine, farming, trade, family life likely remained steady. Perhaps the larger shifts were felt more in the background, influencing structures rather than immediate experiences. You hear the faint sound of movement nearby. A small group is passing through, carrying goods bundled in cloth. Their pace is steady, their expressions calm. Whatever changes have occurred, life continues. This quiet persistence begins to feel familiar. You notice how the land itself reflects this idea. Layers of construction, rebuilding, adaptation. Nothing is entirely erased. Instead, each phase leaves something behind, a foundation for what comes next. Today, when we think about change, it often feels immediate. News travels quickly, shifts in power are broadcast instantly, but here change feels slower, more integrated into the flow of life. It takes time to be fully understood. As you step past the ruins, the path becomes clearer again, as if guiding you forward beyond what has already been lived. There is something important in this continuity. Even as empires rise and fall, even as new influences arrive, the core of Persian identity remains present. Not unchanged, but not lost either. Some historians suggest that this ability to absorb and adapt is one of the defining features of Persian civilization. Others remain cautious, pointing out that continuity can sometimes be overstated, that each era brings its own distinct transformations. Still, as you walk, it feels as though both can be true at once, change and continuity existing side by side. The sky above you deepens into a darker shade, now the stars growing more pronounced. The world feels quieter again, as if the brief tension of transition has settled into a new balance. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels slightly cooler here, carrying a hint of stone and distance. And in this moment, you begin to understand that survival is not always about resistance. Sometimes it is about adaptation, about allowing new elements to enter without letting go of what came before. This quiet resilience will echo forward through time, shaping how this land responds to future encounters, future pressures, future relationships with distant powers that have not yet arrived on this stage. For now, though, the path remains steady. You continue walking, the ruins fading gently behind you, their presence still felt but no longer in view as the journey moves forward into the next layer of history. You continue forward, and over time the land begins to open again, stretching outward into wide plains that seem to breathe quietly beneath the night sky. The path beneath your feet grows firmer once more, not as polished as before, but still clearly used, clearly important. The wind has softened, and with it comes a faint new scent, something richer. This time a mix of spices, dried goods, and distant cooking fires that hint at movement far beyond what you can see. As you walk, you begin to notice more travellers again, not just individuals or small groups, but steady flows of people moving in both directions. Some guide animals burdened with goods, others carry bundles tied carefully with cloth. Their pace is calm, unhurried, as if the journey itself is simply part of life rather than something to be rushed. To understand this moment, it helps to step gently into another layer of history. Persia, positioned between east and west, became a central part of what would later be called the Silk Road, a network of trade routes connecting distant civilizations. Goods such as silk from China, spices from India, and metals from various regions passed through these lands, carried by traders who often travelled for months or even years. You pause near a small gathering where several travellers have stopped to rest. Their clothing varies widely. Some wear finely woven fabrics with intricate patterns, while others are dressed more simply, their garments worn from long travel. The diversity feels natural here, as if this place exists not as a single culture but as a meeting point of many. One well-established detail is that Persian territories served as a crucial bridge between continents, enabling the exchange not just of goods but of ideas, technologies, and even belief systems. It is easy to overlook how significant this was. Without such connections, many of the innovations we take for granted today might have taken far longer to spread. You sit for a moment noticing how conversations blend together in different languages. Even if you cannot understand the words, you can sense the intent. Negotiation, storytelling, simple curiosity, a shared human need to connect. A detail that is often less widely known is that along these trade routes, certain caravanserais, roadside inns were established to provide shelter for travellers. These places offered food, water, and a place to rest, creating a network of support that made long-distance trade more sustainable. You might think of them as early versions of roadside stops, though perhaps with a bit more dust and a lot more storytelling. You glance toward one such structure nearby. Its walls are thick, built to protect against both weather and wandering threats. Inside, you can hear the soft clinking of pottery, the murmur of shared meals, and the occasional quiet laugh that feels almost out of place in such a vast and quiet world. As you enter, the warmth greets you immediately. The air is filled with the smell of cooked grains, herbs, and something slightly sweet, perhaps dried fruit or honey. A small fire burns in the centre, its light casting gentle shadows that move slowly across the walls. And you might wonder how people from such different backgrounds manage to interact without constant conflict. Some researchers suggest that trade itself encouraged cooperation, creating a kind of unspoken agreement that mutual benefit was more valuable than confrontation. Others propose that tensions were always present, simply managed rather than eliminated. You notice a trader carefully unwrapping a piece of fabric, revealing a smooth, shimmering surface that catches the firelight. Silk perhaps brought from far to the east. Another examines it closely, running their fingers along its surface with quiet appreciation. This exchange feels almost timeless. The careful balance of offering and receiving, of trust and caution. Outside, the night continues to deepen, but inside, time feels slower, softer. You sit near the edge of the space, your back resting lightly against the cool wall, listening to the low hum of conversation. In a modern sense, global trade is often invisible. Goods appear on shelves without much thought about the journeys they have taken. But here, every item carries a story, a path travelled, a risk taken, a connection formed across distance. As you rest, you begin to understand that these routes are shaping more than economies. They are shaping perspectives, allowing people to see beyond their immediate surroundings, to imagine worlds that exist far beyond the horizon. Some scholars propose that this exposure to diverse cultures contributed to a more flexible and an adaptive mindset within Persian society. Others remain cautious, noting that local traditions remained strong and that external influences were often carefully filtered rather than fully embraced. You stand again after a while, stepping back out into the cool night air. The contrast is immediate, the warmth fading as the breeze touches your skin. The road awaits, stretching onward, illuminated faintly by starlight and the occasional distant flame. As you walk, you carry with you the sense of connection that filled that small gathering space. A reminder that even in ancient times, long before modern borders and alliances, relationships between distant lands were already forming. Slowly, quietly, through trade, through conversation, through shared human experience. This habit of connection, of interacting with distant cultures while maintaining a strong sense of identity, will leave a lasting imprint. It will influence how this land and the people within it approach relationships in the centuries to come. For now, though, the journey remains simple. One step, then another. The soft sound of your footsteps blending with the distant movement of others travelling through the night. You continue along the road, and after a while the steady movement of travellers begins to thin again. The sounds of conversation fade into the distance, replaced by a quieter rhythm. The land feels broader here, more open, as if the world itself is taking a slow breath. The ground beneath your feet remains firm, though not as carefully maintained as before. Small stones press gently against your soles, shifting slightly with each step. The air carries a cooler tone now, and with it comes a faint dryness that settles softly in your throat. As you walk, you begin to notice the subtle signs of change again. Not sudden, not dramatic, but present. The structures you pass look slightly different. The materials vary. The patterns carved into stone or wood no longer follow a single style. Instead, they reflect a blend, a layering of influences that feels both natural and complex. To understand this moment, it helps to look at the centuries that followed the fall of earlier empires. After the Achaemenid period and the arrival of Greek influence, Persia experienced further transformations under the Parthian and later the Sasanian empires. These dynasties rebuilt power in the region, establishing systems of governance that would once again shape the identity of the land. One widely accepted detail is that the Sasanian Empire, which rose in the 3rd century CE, became one of the dominant powers of its time, rivaling the Roman Empire to the west. This was not just a distant political rivalry. It influenced trade, military strategy, and the daily lives of people living near the borders of these vast territories. You come across a small settlement quieter than the trading hubs you passed earlier. A few homes cluster together, their walls built from stone and earth, sturdy but simple. A thin line of smoke rises from one of the rooftops, drifting slowly into the night. You step closer, hearing the soft creak of wood as someone moves inside. The sound feels familiar, grounding, like the quiet routines that continue regardless of larger events unfolding beyond the horizon. A lesser-known detail from this era is that the Sasanian administration developed a structured system of taxation and governance that allowed for relatively stable economic conditions in many regions. It was not perfect, of course, but it created a sense of order that supported both agriculture and trade. You notice a small garden beside one of the homes, its plants arranged carefully despite the dry environment. Someone has taken the time to tend it to bring a bit of life into a landscape that can often feel harsh. And you might find yourself wondering how people here perceived the larger empires that claimed authority over them. Did they feel connected to these distant centres of power, or did their lives remain mostly local, shaped by immediate needs and relationships? Some historians suggest that imperial influence was strongest in administrative and military matters, while daily life continued with the degree of independence. Others believe that cultural identity was more deeply shaped by these dynasties than we often assume. You pause near a doorway, noticing the texture of the wood beneath your fingers. It is worn smooth in places, rough in others, shaped by years of use. Inside you hear quiet voices, steady and calm, discussing something that seems practical, perhaps the next day's work or the condition of the land. The world here feels grounded, rooted, and yet beyond this small space, larger forces continue to shift. The rivalry between the Sasanian Empire and Rome creates a kind of distant tension influencing borders, trade routes, and alliances. Even if it is not always visible here, it exists, shaping the conditions under which people live. Researchers continue to question how much these geopolitical tensions directly affected ordinary communities. While some regions experienced conflict more directly, others may have felt only subtle changes, shifts in taxation, in trade opportunities, or in the presence of soldiers passing through. You step back onto the path, the night air brushing gently against your face. The stars above remain constant, their quiet presence unchanged by the movements of empires below. Today we often think of global power in terms of rapid change-shifting alliances, immediate consequences. But here the process feels slower, more gradual. Changes unfold over generations, not days. As you walk, you begin to notice how resilience is taking shape in a new way. Not just the ability to endure, but the ability to rebuild, to reorganize, to create stability even when the larger world feels uncertain. You pass another structure, this one slightly larger, perhaps used for gathering or administration. Its walls are thicker, its entrance more defined. A faint light glows from within, casting a soft outline onto the ground. Inside, you can hear the quiet murmur of discussion voices, measured and deliberate. Decisions are being made here, small ones perhaps, but part of a larger system that keeps everything moving. Some scholars suggest that this long tradition of structured governance contributed to a lasting expectation of centralized authority in the region. Others argue that local autonomy remained equally important, creating a balance that would continue to evolve over time. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels cooler now, the night settling more deeply around you. And in this moment you begin to understand that history is not just a sequence of events. It is a pattern, a rhythm, a series of adjustments that build upon one another, shaping how a place responds to what comes next. The path ahead remains steady, stretching into the darkness with quiet certainty. You continue walking. The small settlement fading behind you, its warmth and quiet routine still lingering in your mind as the journey carries you forward into the next chapter of this long and unfolding story. You continue forward and gradually the land begins to change again. The air feels slightly different now, carrying a faint hint of something new, something softer, almost like the scent of distant water mixed with warm earth. The road beneath your feet becomes less defined in places, as if older paths are blending into newer ones, each layer quietly overlapping the last. The night remains calm, but there is a subtle shift in the atmosphere, the kind of shift you feel more than see. To understand this moment, it helps to move gently into another turning point in history. In the 7th century, the Sasanian Empire came into contact with the expanding forces of early Islam. Over time, this led to the integration of Persia into the Islamic world, a transformation that reshaped political structures, religious practices, and cultural identity. You walk toward a small cluster of buildings, their shapes familiar but carrying slight differences in design. The architecture feels more fluid now, less rigid, with open spaces that invite gathering. A soft glow spills from within, not harsh or bright, but steady and welcoming. As you approach, you hear a new kind of sound, not loud, not commanding, but clear and rhythmic. a voice reciting something with measured cadence rising and falling gently in the night air. The sound feels intentional, almost like a thread connecting those who listen. One well-documented detail is that as Islam spread into Persian lands, it did not completely erase what came before. Instead, over generations, Persian culture and Islamic traditions began to intertwine, creating something distinct from both its origins and its influences. You step closer, noticing how people gather quietly, some seated, others standing or listening with calm attention. The air carries the faint scent of woven mats, warm stone and a trace of oil from small lamps placed carefully along the walls. And you might wonder how such a transformation unfolded without completely disrupting daily life. Did people resist, adapt, or simply continue living while the larger framework around them shifted? Some historians propose that the transition was gradual, with many communities integrating new religious practices over time while maintaining elements of older traditions. Others suggest that the process varied widely, with some regions experiencing more rapid change than others. You sit near the edge of the gathering, the cool surface beneath you, grounding and steady. The voice continues, its rhythm almost hypnotic, creating a sense of calm that settles gently into the space. A detail that is often overlooked is how Persian scholars later played a major role in shaping Islamic intellectual life, contributing to fields such as science, philosophy, and literature. This blending of knowledge traditions created a cultural richness that extended far beyond the region itself. You notice a young student nearby carefully tracing symbols onto a small surface, their movements slow and deliberate. The act feels quiet but important, as if knowledge itself is being carried forward through simple repetition. The world here feels both familiar and new at the same time. You glance around, observing how clothing has subtly changed. The fabrics, the way they are worn, the patterns they carry. These are small details, but they reflect deeper shifts in identity. Outside, the night remains still, the stars continuing their silent presence above. Inside, the space feels warm, not just in temperature, but in intention. Today, we often think of cultural change as something sudden, something that replaces one system with another. But here it feels more like a layering process. New ideas settling gently over old ones, not erasing them, but reshaping them. As the gathering slowly begins to disperse, people rise quietly, exchanging soft words before stepping back into the night. There is no urgency, no rush, just a steady continuation of life. Researchers continue to explore how this blending of Persian and Islamic traditions influenced long-term identity in the region. Was it a transformation or an evolution? A shift or a continuation in a new form? You stand and step back outside, the cool air meeting you again. The contrast between inside and outside feels gentle, not abrupt. As you return to the path, you begin to notice how this new layer of identity carries forward a familiar pattern. Adaptation without complete loss. Change that builds rather than replaces. This quiet ability to integrate new influences will shape how this land interacts with future powers, future cultures, and future challenges. It will create a perspective that values both continuity and transformation, a balance that is not always easy but deeply rooted. You take another slow breath, noticing how the air feels slightly softer now, as if carrying traces of both past and present. The road stretches ahead, steady and open, guiding you further into this long journey. And as you walk, the soft echo of that rhythmic voice lingers in your mind, a quiet reminder that even in times of great change, life continues step by step, shaped by both what remains and what evolves. You continue along the path, and over time the sounds of the gathering fade, completely replaced once again by the quiet openness of the night. The land feels calmer here, almost reflective, as if it is holding on to something delicate rather than something heavy. The ground beneath your feet becomes smoother again, worn by steady use, but no longer crowded with travellers. The air carries a faint trace of something new, a subtle sweetness perhaps from distant gardens or cultivated land. It feels softer than before, less harsh, as though the world itself has settled into a more thoughtful rhythm. As you walk, you begin to notice signs of a different kind of activity. Not trade, not governance, but creation. Small details appear along the path. Carved stone with intricate patterns, fragments of painted surfaces, lines of script carefully etched into walls or objects, their shapes flowing in a way that feels almost musical. To understand this moment, it helps to step into the cultural world that flourished in Persia during the Islamic Golden Age. This was a time when Persian scholars, poets, and artists contributed deeply to literature, science, and philosophy, shaping intellectual traditions that extended far beyond the region. You approach a quiet courtyard, its entrance marked by an arch that curves gently overhead. Inside, the space feels calm and enclosed, protected from the open landscape. A small fountain sits at the center, its water moving slowly, creating a soft, steady sound that blends with the night air. One widely recognized detail is that Persian poetry, especially works by figures like Ferdowsi and later Rumi, became central to preserving language and identity. These writings were not just artistic expressions, they carried history, values, and a sense of continuity through changing times. You sit near the edge of the courtyard, your hand brushing lightly against the cool stone beside you. The texture is smooth, worn by years of touch, yet still holding the precision of its original design. A voice nearby begins to recite. Not loud, not performative, but steady and intentional. The words flow in a rhythm that feels almost like breathing. Even without understanding every phrase, you can sense the emotion behind it. Reflection, memory, longing, perhaps even a quiet sense of pride. And you might find yourself wondering why poetry held such importance here. In a world without modern media, without instant communication, these spoken and written forms became a way to carry ideas across generations. A lesser-known detail is that the Persian epic Shahnameh, composed by Ferdowsi, played a key role in preserving pre-Islamic Persian history and mythology at a time when many older traditions might have been lost. It served as a bridge between past and present, keeping cultural memory alive through storytelling. You glance toward a small group seated nearby. One person carefully copies text onto a surface, their movements slow and precise. Another listens intently, occasionally nodding as if each word carries weight beyond its sound. The atmosphere here feels deeply focused yet peaceful. There is no rush, no sense of urgency. Just the quiet act of creation and preservation. Some researchers suggest that this cultural flourishing helped reinforce a strong sense of identity, even as political structures continue to change. Others propose that it was precisely because of these changes that such artistic expression became so important to offering stability in uncertain times. You notice how the design of the courtyard reflects this balance, order and beauty combined. Symmetry that feels intentional, calming, almost meditative. Today we often think of art as something separate from daily life, something we consume rather than live within. But here it feels integrated into everything. Into architecture, into language, into the very way people understand themselves. The sound of the fountain continues soft and steady, creating a gentle backdrop to the quiet voices around you. You feel a sense of stillness settle in, not empty, but full in a quiet way. You run your fingers along a line of script carved into the stone. The shapes feel deliberate, flowing, as if each mark was placed with care and intention. As you sit there, you begin to understand that identity is not only shaped by power or conflict, it is also shaped by memory, by expression, by the stories people choose to tell and preserve. Scholars continue to explore how much of this cultural identity remained consistent over time and how much evolved with each generation. Was it a fixed tradition, or something that adapted continuously, much like the society itself? You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels slightly warmer within the courtyard, protected from the open night. After a while, you stand and move toward the exit, the soft sound of the fountain fading gently behind you. As you return to the path, the world outside feels a little different now. Not changed in any obvious way, but deeper. As if you are beginning to see not just the structures of history, but the layers of meaning beneath them. The road stretches ahead steady and quiet, carrying you forward once more. And as you walk, the rhythm of those spoken words lingers softly in your mind, a reminder that even in times of transformation, culture has a way of preserving what matters most. You move forward again, leaving behind the quiet courtyard and its gentle fountain, returning to the open path where the night stretches wide and unbroken. The air feels slightly cooler now, brushing softly against your face, and the scent of water fades, replaced once more by dry earth and distant stone. The road begins to feel more defined again, not in the same way as before, but with a different kind of intention. The land ahead shows signs of careful organisation, fields arranged in measured patterns, irrigation channels guiding water with quiet precision. Even in the dim light, you can sense structure, a deliberate shaping of the environment. To understand this moment, you are stepping into the era of the Safavid Empire, which emerged in the early 16th century. This period marked a significant turning point as Persia transformed into a centralized state with a clearly defined identity. One firmly established detail is that under Shah Ismail, the first 12 Shi'ism was declared the official religion shaping the political and spiritual framework of the region in lasting ways. You approach a small village nestled near cultivated land. The layout feels orderly, the homes arranged with intention rather than scattered by chance. A faint glow spills from narrow windows, and the soft sound of water moving through channels creates a steady, calming rhythm. As you walk between the buildings, you notice how the architecture reflects both function and beauty. Walls are sturdy, built to endure, but decorated with subtle patterns that catch the eye. Even in simplicity there is care. A detail that often goes unnoticed is how the Safavid rulers invested in infrastructure such as bridges, roads, and irrigation systems, helping to support agriculture and trade. These improvements created a sense of cohesion, linking distant regions more tightly together. You pause near a narrow canal watching as water flows steadily through it. The surface reflects the faint light of the sky, shimmering gently with each movement. It feels almost soothing, the quiet consistency of it, and you might find yourself wondering how such a strong sense of identity was established across such a diverse land. Was it embraced willingly, or did it require careful enforcement? Some scholars suggest that the promotion of Shi'ism helped unify the population under a shared belief system, creating a distinct identity that set Persia apart from its neighbours. Others note that this process may have involved periods of tension as communities adjusted to new expectations. You continue walking, the soft sound of your footsteps blending with the steady flow of water. The village feels calm, but beneath that calm you can sense the presence of structure of order that has been carefully built and maintained. You notice a small gathering near one of the homes. A few people sit together speaking quietly. Their conversation seems thoughtful, measured as if shaped by shared understanding. A lesser-known aspect of this period is the role of religious scholars, who became increasingly influential in both spiritual and political life. Their interpretations and guidance helped shape not only belief, but also aspects of governance and social norms. You sit for a moment near the edge of the gathering, listening to the soft cadence of their voices. The tone feels calm, but purposeful, as if each word carries weight beyond the immediate moment. The air here feels slightly warmer, protected by the walls of the village, and you notice how the scent of cooking food drifts gently through the space. Grains, herbs, something faintly sweet. It is comforting, grounding. A reminder that daily life continues even as larger structures take shape. Today, identity often feels fluid, influenced by many factors at once. But here it is, being shaped with intention, guided by both leadership and shared belief. It creates a sense of belonging, but also boundaries defining who is part of this system and who stands outside it. You rise slowly, stepping back towards the path. The village remains quiet behind you, its order and rhythm lingering in your thoughts. As you continue walking, you begin to sense how this period leaves a lasting imprint. The combination of centralized authority and defined religious identity creates a framework that will influence future relationships with the outside world. The road stretches ahead steady and clear, guiding you forward into the next phase of this unfolding story. And as you move on, the soft sound of water continues to echo faintly behind you, a quiet reminder of how structure and belief can shape not just a place but the way it sees itself and others. You continue walking, and as the village fades behind you, the sound of flowing water becomes softer, almost like a memory rather than a presence. The land stretches outward once again, but something feels different now. There is a quiet sense of direction in the air, as if the path ahead is shaped not only by geography, but by ideas that are becoming more defined. The ground beneath your feet remains steady though now, and then you notice subtle markers placed along the way, small signs that someone has taken care to guide movement through this space. The night feels calm, yet there is a quiet depth to it, as if layers of thought and belief are settling into the land itself. You are still within the Safavid world, but now you begin to feel the deeper influence of what was set in motion. The adoption of Twelver Shireism did not remain only at the level of leadership. Over time it shaped rituals, community life, and the way people understood both authority and justice. One well-documented element is that public religious practices, including commemorations and gatherings, became more prominent, reinforcing a shared identity across regions. You come across a wider open space where a group has gathered under the dim glow of lantern light. The atmosphere is quiet but focused. People stand or sit close together, their attention directed toward a central figure who speaks in a calm, measured tone. As you move closer, you notice the rhythm of the gathering. It is not hurried. Each word is given space to settle. The air carries the faint scent of oil from the lamps mixed with the coolness of the night. You take a seat near the edge, feeling the ground beneath you slightly rough but steady. The voice at the centre speaks of meaning, of guidance, of the importance of understanding one's place within a larger framework. A detail that is sometimes overlooked is how these gatherings helped create a shared emotional and spiritual experience among communities. They were not just about belief, but about connection, about reinforcing a sense of belonging. And you might find yourself wondering how this shared identity influenced the way people viewed those outside their world. Did it create a stronger sense of unity? Or did it also draw clearer lines between groups? Some researchers suggest that the consolidation of a distinct religious identity contributed to a stronger internal cohesion, while also setting Persia apart from neighbouring Sunni majority regions. Others propose that these differences were not always as rigid in everyday life as they might appear in historical narratives. You glance around, noticing how people listen with quiet attention. There is no sense of distraction, no urgency to move on. The moment feels complete in itself. A lesser-known aspect of this period is the development of religious schools and centres of learning, where scholars studied theology, law, and philosophy. These institutions became important spaces for shaping thought and guiding interpretation. You notice a young student nearby holding a small object, perhaps a text, or notes their focus steady, their posture attentive. The act of learning here feels deliberate, almost meditative. The night air remains cool, brushing lightly against your skin, while the warmth of the gathering creates a gentle contrast. You become aware of the subtle balance between these sensations, the cool and the warm, the quiet and the spoken. Today, discussions of identity often feel abstract, shaped by media and distant conversations, but here it is lived experience direct. Through gatherings like this, through shared moments that reinforce a collective understanding. As the gathering begins to wind down, people rise slowly, exchanging soft words before stepping back into the night. The movement is calm, unhurried, as if there is no need to rush away from something that will return again. You stand as well, brushing your hands lightly against your clothing, feeling the texture of the fabric beneath your fingers. The ground beneath you feels cool again as you step away from the warmth of the group. As you return to the path, the world feels subtly different. Not because of any visible change, but because you have begun to sense the depth of the structures forming beneath the surface. This strengthening of identity, of shared belief and interpretation, will continue to influence how this land interacts with others. It will shape perspectives, guide decisions, and create patterns that extend far beyond this moment. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels still and steady, carrying only the faintest traces of the gathering behind you. The road stretches forward quiet and certain, leading you deeper into the unfolding layers of history. And as you walk, the memory of that shared space lingers softly, a reminder that identity is not only something inherited, but something continually shaped through lived experience. You continue along the road, and over time the stillness begins to shift once more. The land feels slightly busier ahead, though not in a crowded sense, more like a quiet anticipation, as if something new is approaching from beyond the horizon. The air carries unfamiliar traces now, a faint scent of polished wood of fabric treated with oils of something distant that does not quite belong to this place but has found its way here anyway. The path widens gently and the ground feels more compacted, shaped by the increased movement over time. As you walk, you begin to notice figures whose appearance differs subtly from those you have seen before. Their clothing carries different cuts and materials, their posture slightly more formal, their movements careful, observant. They seem both curious and cautious, taking in their surroundings with quiet attention. To understand this moment, you are stepping into a period when Persia began interacting more directly with European powers. These encounters were not yet defined by dominance or conflict in the modern sense, but they introduced new dynamics into the region. Trade diplomacy and curiosity all played a role. One commonly accepted detail is that during the Safavid period, Persia established diplomatic and commercial contacts with various European states, including England, Portugal, and others, seeking access to trade routes and resources. These interactions mark the beginning of more sustained connections between Persia and the West, or Western Wars. You approach a small outpost where a few individuals have gathered. The atmosphere is calm, but there is a subtle tension, not negative, just attentive. Table has been set up simple but deliberate. Items are placed carefully upon it. Objects of trade, perhaps, or symbols of agreement. You stand a short distance observing. The exchange is quiet, measured. Words are spoken, slowly translated when needed, gestures filling in the gaps where language may fall short. A detail that is not always emphasized is how much of these early encounters relied on mutual curiosity. European visitors were often fascinated by Persian culture, its art, its organization, its refinement. At the same time, Persian observers took note of foreign customs, technologies, and behaviors. You might think of it as a meeting of mirrors, each side trying to understand the other, while also reflecting on itself. And you might wonder how these first impressions shaped future relationships. Did they create a sense of openness, or did they plant early seeds of caution? Some historians suggest that these interactions were initially balanced, driven by mutual benefit and interest. Others note that underlying differences in intention may have been present from the beginning, even if they were not yet fully visible. You notice how one of the figures gently lifts an object, examining it closely. The movement is careful, respectful. There is an awareness here that each item carries value, not just in material terms, but in what it represents. Nearby, a small group watches quietly, their expressions neutral but attentive. The air feels still, as if even the night itself is pausing to observe. A lesser-known detail is that Persian artisans and goods, especially textiles and carpets, became highly valued in European markets during this time. These items were not just products, but symbols of craftsmanship and cultural identity. You step a little closer, noticing the texture of one such fabric laid out on the table. Even in low light, you can see the detail, the careful weaving, the patterns that seem almost alive with meaning. Today, we often think of international relations in terms of formal agreements and policies, but here it begins with something simpler. Objects exchanged, conversations shared, impressions formed quietly over time. As the exchange continues, you begin to sense the delicate balance at play. There is interest, certainly, but also caution. Each side is learning, observing, trying to understand not just what is offered, but what lies behind it. Researchers continue to explore how these early encounters influenced later developments. Were they the foundation of long-term relationships, or simply brief moments of contact that would later be reshaped by changing circumstances? The answer feels uncertain, but the significance of the moment remains clear. After some time, the gathering begins to dissolve. The figures step back, the objects carefully returned or exchanged. There is no dramatic conclusion, just a quiet closing of the interaction. You step away as well, returning to the path. The air feels slightly cooler now, the faint, unfamiliar scents fading as you move forward. As you walk, you carry with you the impression of that meeting. Not loud or defining, but important in a subtle way. A first step in a long process of interaction between worlds that have once felt distant from one another. The road stretches ahead, steady and open, leading you further into this unfolding story. And as you continue, you begin to sense that these early moments of contact, quiet and careful, will echo forward in ways that are not yet fully understood. You continue forward and gradually the traces of that quiet meeting begin to dissolve into the wider stillness of the land. The road narrows slightly, though it remains clear enough to guide your steps without effort. The air feels a little heavier now, carrying hints of movement from distant places, as if the world beyond this path is becoming more active, more interconnected. The night remains calm, yet there is a subtle undercurrent beneath it. Not tension exactly, but awareness. The kind of awareness that grows when unfamiliar worlds begin to draw closer together. As you walk, you begin to notice more travellers again, though they seem different from those you encountered earlier. Their pace is steady, but their expressions carry a kind of attentiveness, as if they're observing not just the road but each other. Their clothing reflects a mix of styles, some familiar, others shaped by distant influences. To understand this moment, you are moving into a time when Persia's interactions with foreign powers become more frequent and more complex. Trade continues, but it is no longer the only purpose. Curiosity remains, but it is now joined by strategy, by cautious evaluation of intentions. A commonly recognized point from this period is that European powers increasingly sought influence in regions connected to trade routes, including Persia, as global commerce expanded. This brought new opportunities, but also new uncertainties. You come across a small resting place along the road. A fire burns low, its light soft and steady. Several travellers sit nearby, their conversation quieter than you might expect. There is less laughter here, more measured tones, as if each word is considered before it is spoken. You sit at a short distance, feeling the warmth of the fire just enough to contrast with the cool night air. The scent of smoke rises gently, blending with the faint aroma of food being prepared. One person speaks of distant lands, describing ships larger than anything seen here, carrying goods across vast waters. Another listens, nodding slowly, as if trying to imagine something far beyond their own experience. A detail that does not always receive much attention is how these stories passed from traveller to traveller shaped perceptions long before direct contact became common. Ideas about distant powers often form through fragments of information, incomplete but influential, and you might find yourself wondering how accurate these impressions were. Did they reflect reality, or were they shaped by imagination, by fear, or by hope? Some scholars propose that early perceptions of foreign powers were often a blend of admiration and caution. Others suggest that misunderstanding played a significant role, creating assumptions that would later influence interactions in ways that were difficult to reverse. You notice how the group around the fire listens carefully, not interrupting, not rushing. There is a sense that information itself has value, that understanding even a small part of a distant world can shape decisions closer to home. A lesser-known observation from this era is that diplomatic gifts often carried symbolic meaning beyond their material value. Items exchanged between regions were chosen not only for their worth, but for what they represented about culture, capability and intention. You glance at a small object resting near one of the travellers, something crafted with care, its surface reflecting faint light. It might be such a gift or simply a personal possession, but even in its stillness it feels significant. The fire crackles softly, its sound steady and grounding. The warmth reaches your hands while your back remains touched by the cool night air. The contrast feels familiar now, almost comforting in its consistency. Today information travels instantly, often overwhelming in its speed and volume. But here knowledge moves slowly, carried by people shaped by experience and shared in moments like this. It requires patience, and perhaps because of that it is treated with care. As the conversation continues, you begin to sense the emergence of something new, not yet fully formed, but present. A cautious awareness of difference, a recognition that the world is larger, more complex, and perhaps less predictable than it once seemed. Researchers continue to explore how these early impressions influenced later relationships between Persia and Western powers. Were they the beginning of mutual understanding or the foundation of future misunderstanding? The answer remains layered, shaped by many perspectives. After some time, the fire burns lower, its light softening. The group begins to settle into quiet, some leaning back, others closing their eyes, briefly resting before continuing their journeys. You stand slowly, brushing your hands lightly together, feeling the warmth fade as you step away. The road ahead feels the same as before, yet your awareness of it has shifted. You are no longer walking through a world that feels distant and separate. You are moving through a space where connections are forming, where ideas and perceptions are beginning to overlap. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels still, carrying only the faintest traces of smoke and distant movement. And as you continue, you carry with you the quiet understanding that relationships between distant worlds rarely begin with certainty. They begin with small exchanges, with partial understanding, with a mixture of curiosity and caution that will shape everything that follows. The path stretches onward, steady and patient, guiding you deeper into the unfolding story. You continue along the road, and after some time, the quiet balance you have grown used to begins to shift once more. The land ahead feels heavier, not in a physical sense, but in a way that settles quietly into your awareness. The air carries a faint sharpness now, like dust stirred more often, like movement that is no longer entirely gentle. The path widens again, though this time it feels less like a place of connection and more like a space of passage. People move through it with purpose, their pace slightly quicker, their expressions more focused. Conversations are shorter, more practical. As you walk, you begin to notice changes in the structures around you. Buildings appear more fortified in some areas, their walls thicker, their entrances narrower. Even in the dim light, you can sense a shift in priorities from openness toward protection. To understand this moment, you are stepping into the Qajar period, beginning in the late 18th century, a time when Persia faced increasing pressure from foreign powers, particularly Russia and Britain. These influences were not always direct, but they were persistent, shaping economic conditions, political decisions, and the balance of control within the region. A widely recognized point from this era is that Persia under the Qajar dynasty lost significant territories in the Caucasus to the Russian Empire through a series of conflicts and treaties. These events had long-term consequences, both geographically and psychologically, influencing how the country viewed external powers. You come across a checkpoint along the road, simple but clearly maintained. A few figures stand nearby, watching as travelers pass. Their posture is calm but attentive, as if each movement is being quietly assessed. You slow your pace slightly, noticing how others do the same. There is no fear here, but there is awareness. A sense that the world is becoming more complex, more interconnected in ways that are not entirely comfortable. A detail that often receives less attention is how economic concessions granted to foreign powers during this period affected everyday life. Agreements involving trade resources and infrastructure sometimes place local industries at a disadvantage, creating subtle but lasting tensions. You pause near the edge of the checkpoint, observing the interactions. A traveller presents something, perhaps documentation or goods, and the exchange is brief, efficient. There is little conversation beyond what is necessary, and you might find yourself wondering how people living through this time understood these changes. Did they see them as temporary adjustments or as signs of something deeper shifting beneath the surface? Some historians suggest that these growing foreign influences contributed to a sense of unease among segments of the population, particularly as control over resources and decision-making appeared to move outward. Others propose that many communities remained focused on local concerns, with broader geopolitical shifts felt only indirectly. You continue walking, passing beyond the checkpoint. The road ahead feels quieter again, but the earlier ease has changed. There is a new layer now, something more cautious, more aware of what lies beyond immediate surroundings. You notice a small marketplace in the distance, though it feels different from the lively exchanges you encountered earlier in your journey. The activity here is steady but subdued. Goods are displayed carefully, conversations kept low. A lesser-known observation from this period is that imported goods from Europe began appearing more frequently in Persian markets, sometimes replacing locally produced items. This shift, while gradual, influenced both economic patterns and cultural perceptions. You walk through the market slowly, observing the details. Fabrics, tools, containers, each item placed with care. Some look familiar, others distinctly foreign in design. The air carries a mix of scents. Spices, leather, and something sharper, perhaps metal or treated wood. It feels layered, reflecting the blending of local and external influences. Today, economic influence often moves quietly through systems that are not always visible. But here you can see it directly in the goods on display, in the way people interact, in the subtle changes in what is valued. As you move through the space, you begin to sense a shift in perspective. The outside world is no longer distant or abstract. It is present, tangible, influencing daily life in ways that cannot be easily ignored. Researchers continue to explore how these pressures contributed to later movements for reform and resistance. Were they the primary cause or simply one factor among many? The answer, like much of history, remains complex. You step back onto the road, leaving the market behind. The night air feels cooler again, though the sense of stillness has changed. It now carries a quiet alertness, as if the land itself is aware of the forces moving through it. You take a slow breath, noticing the texture of the air, the faint dryness, the subtle weight of dust. And as you continue walking, you begin to understand that this period marks a gradual shift. Not a sudden break, but a steady movement toward a more complicated relationship with the outside world. The road stretches ahead, steady as always, but the journey now carries a different tone, and you follow it step by step into the unfolding layers of influence, adaptation, and quiet tension that will shape what comes next. You continue along the road, and as time passes, the quiet tension you noticed earlier begins to take on a more defined shape. The land itself feels familiar, yet the activity within it has shifted. There is more movement now, but it carries a different tone. Less about exchange, more about interest. Focused, watchful, steady. The air holds a faint metallic scent, something subtle but present, blending with the usual notes of dust and earth. You might not notice it at first, but the longer you walk, the more it lingers, as if something beneath the surface has begun to matter in a new way. To understand this moment, you're stepping into the late 19th and early 20th centuries when oil was discovered in Persia. This single development would quietly reshape the region's importance on a global scale. In 1908, significant oil reserves were found, marking the beginning of large-scale extraction and foreign involvement in the country's resources. You approach a worksite in the distance. It is not large in the way modern industry might be, but it feels purposeful. Wooden structures stand in simple formation tools arranged carefully nearby. A small number of workers move with steady rhythm, their actions repetitive but necessary. The ground here feels slightly different beneath your feet. Firmer in some places, disturbed in others. The scent in the air grows stronger, a mix of oil and earth, something thick and unfamiliar. A commonly acknowledged detail is that the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, backed by British interests, played a central role in developing these resources. The agreement surrounding oil extraction granted significant control to foreign entities, shaping economic and political relationships for decades to come. You stand at a distance watching the work unfold. There is no rush, no visible urgency, but there is a sense of importance that hangs quietly over the scene. Each movement feels part of something larger, something not fully visible from where you stand. And you might find yourself wondering how people living nearby understood this change. Did they see it as opportunity, as disruption, or simply as another layer added to a long history of adaptation? Some researchers suggest that the discovery of oil introduced new forms of dependency, linking Persia more closely to global powers with growing energy demands. Others note that it also created possibilities for modernization, even if those possibilities were not evenly distributed. You notice a small group gathered just beyond the worksite, speaking in low voices. Their expressions are thoughtful, perhaps uncertain. The presence of foreign equipment and unfamiliar methods has introduced something new into the landscape. A detail that is not always widely discussed is how the early oil industry required not only resources, but also labour and infrastructure, leading to the development of new towns and communities centred around extraction sites. These places often blended local life with external influence in ways that felt both practical and unfamiliar. You take a few steps closer, noticing how the equipment reflects a different style of construction. The materials, the design, the way pieces fit together all carry traces of knowledge developed elsewhere and brought here with intention. The air feels heavier, now warmer in a subtle way, as if the ground itself is releasing something it has held for a very long time. Today, energy is something we rarely think about in physical terms. It flows invisibly into our homes, powering daily life without much reflection. But here you can see its origin. You can feel its presence in the ground, in the air, in the careful work of those extracting it. As you stand there, you begin to sense how this discovery changes the nature of interaction with the outside world. It is no longer only about trade routes or cultural exchange. It is about resources, about value that extends far beyond local use. Scholars continue to examine how these early agreements shaped long-term perceptions of fairness and control. Were they seen as necessary partnerships or as arrangements that favoured external interests at the expense of local autonomy? Perspectives vary, shaped by different interpretations of the same events. You step back slowly, the scent of oil lingering faintly as you return to the path. The worksite remains behind you, its steady activity continuing without pause. The road ahead feels unchanged, yet your understanding of it has deepened. You are no longer walking through a world shaped only by tradition and gradual change. You are moving through a landscape that is becoming part of a larger global system, one that will influence decisions, relationships, and perceptions in ways that are not yet fully visible. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels slightly warmer, here carrying both the familiar and the unfamiliar at once. And as you continue walking, you begin to understand that this moment marks a quiet turning point. Not loud or immediate, but significant in a way that will echo forward through time. The path stretches onward, steady and patient, guiding you deeper into the unfolding story. And you follow it step by step as the land itself begins to reveal the hidden value that will shape its future connections with distant powers. You continue along the road, and gradually the scent of oil fades into the distance, replaced once more by the familiar mix of cool air and quiet earth. Yet something has shifted within the journey. The land feels more aware now, as if it carries not only its past, but a growing sense of what it might become. The path beneath your feet remains steady, but the atmosphere around you feels slightly more active, not in sound, but in thought. The kind of change that begins quietly forming in conversations and ideas, in the way people begin to question what has long been accepted. As you walk, you begin to notice small gatherings once again, not centered around trade or ritual this time, but around discussion. People sit together in modest spaces, their voices low but purposeful. The tone feels different, more reflective, more searching. To understand this moment, you're entering the early 20th century, a period when Persia experienced growing calls for reform. In 1906, the Constitutional Revolution led to the establishment of a parliament known as the Majlis, marking an important step toward representative governance. You approach one such gathering held in a simple room lit by a few small lamps. The air carries the faint scent of paper ink and warm oil. Several individuals sit close together, speaking carefully as if weighing each word before letting it settle into the space. A widely accepted historical point is that this movement aimed to limit the power of the monarchy and introduce legal and institutional reforms reflecting a desire for greater participation in decision-making. You sit quietly near the edge observing. A document is passed from one person to another, its surface filled with lines of carefully written text. Each reader studies it closely, pausing, reflecting before passing it on. And you might find yourself wondering what it felt like to live in such a moment, to stand between long-standing traditions of authority and a growing desire for change. Some researchers suggest that the Constitutional Revolution was driven by a combination of factors, including economic pressure, foreign influence, and internal dissatisfaction with governance. Others emphasize the role of intellectuals and merchants in shaping the movement, highlighting how different groups contributed to its development. You notice how the conversation shifts gently from ideas to practical concerns, how to implement change, how to balance tradition with new structures. The tone remains calm, but the intent is clear. A lesser-known aspect of this period is the role of public spaces, such as mosques and marketplaces, in spreading ideas. These were not only places of daily activity, but also centres of communication where discussions could reach a wider audience. You glance toward the doorway where a few individuals stand, listening quietly. Their presence suggests that these conversations extend beyond the room, moving outward into the broader community. The air feels warm inside, but just beyond the doorway, the cool night waits patiently. The contrast feels familiar now, like the balance between what is known and what is emerging. Today, discussions about governance often take place in formal settings, structured and visible. But here they begin in quieter ways, through shared thought, through careful dialogue, through moments like this where change takes root slowly. You run your fingers lightly along the edge of the surface beside you, noticing its texture, worn but steady. It feels like a fitting reflection of the moment itself. Something built over time now being shaped into something new. Scholars continue to examine how effective these early reforms were in practice. Did they create lasting structural change, or were they limited by the conditions surrounding them? Interpretations vary, shaped by different perspectives on what defines success. After some time, the gathering begins to settle. The document is placed carefully aside, the conversation softens, and people begin to rise slowly, each carrying their own thoughts into the night. You stand as well, stepping back out onto the path. The cool air greets you again, refreshing, steady. As you continue walking, you begin to sense that something important has shifted. Not in the landscape, but in the way people think about it. The idea that authority can be shaped, that systems can evolve, that participation can expand. This moment, quiet as it feels, will influence how this land approaches power governance and its place in a changing world. It will shape expectations, create new possibilities, and introduce new tensions. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels lighter again though. The weight of thought lingers gently. The road stretches ahead as it always has, steady and open. And as you walk, you carry with you the quiet sense that change is no longer something that happens only from above or from outside. It is something that can grow from within, one conversation at a time. You continue along the road, and as the quiet discussions of reform fade behind you, the world begins to feel more structured again. Not in the soft, organic way you've grown used to, but with a sharper sense of direction. The path beneath your feet feels more deliberate, more maintained, as if guided by a clearer vision of what lies ahead. The air carries a different kind of energy now. Still calm, still measured, but with a faint sense of momentum. The kind that builds gradually, like the steady turning of gears you cannot quite see but can somehow feel. As you walk, the landscape begins to shift. Villages give way to larger settlements, and those settlements begin to take on new forms. Buildings appear more uniform, their lines straighter, their materials more consistent. Roads become wider, more defined, connecting spaces with increasing efficiency. To understand this moment, you're stepping into the early 20th century under Reza Shah, a period marked by rapid modernization and centralization. Infrastructure expanded, new institutions were established, and efforts were made to reshape the country into a more unified and modern state. One well-established detail is that Reza Shah implemented reforms aimed at strengthening central authority, building railways, developing industry, and introducing changes in education and dress codes. These changes were intended to transform the country's structure and image, both internally and in the eyes of the world. You approach a newly built road, its surface smoother than those you have walked before. It reflects a different kind of intention, less shaped by time or by planning. As you step onto it, you notice how your movement becomes easier, more predictable. Nearby workers move steadily, adjusting materials, reinforcing structures. Their actions are coordinated, purposeful, reflecting a system that values order and efficiency. And you might find yourself wondering how such rapid change was experienced by those living through it. Did it feel like progress, like disruption, or perhaps both at once? Some historians suggest that modernization brought significant improvements in infrastructure and national cohesion, helping to strengthen the state. Others point out that these changes were often implemented from above, sometimes creating tension among communities that were accustomed to different ways of life. You pass a group of individuals dressed in newer styles, their clothing reflecting updated norms. The fabrics, the cuts, even the colours feel slightly different from what you have seen before. A detail that is sometimes overlooked is how reforms extended into daily life in very visible ways, influencing how people dressed, how they were educated and how they interacted within public spaces. These were not distant policies, but changes that touched everyday experience. You walk past a building that stands out from the others. Its design feels modern for its time, with cleaner lines and a more formal structure. Inside, you hear the faint echo of voices, perhaps a classroom or an administrative office. The air here carries a faint scent of paper and ink mixed with the dryness of the surrounding land. It feels organized, intentional, as if knowledge itself is being structured in a new way. Today, modernization often happens gradually supported by technology that spreads change quickly. But here the process feels concentrated, driven by leadership with a clear vision of transformation. You pause for a moment, watching as people move through this new environment. Some walk with confidence, adapting easily. Others move more cautiously, as if adjusting to unfamiliar expectations. Researchers continue to examine how these reforms influence long-term identity. Did they create a stronger sense of national unity, or did they introduce division between tradition and modernity? The answer seems to exist somewhere in between. You notice how the road you're on connects seamlessly to others, forming a network that feels more integrated than before. Movement becomes easier, distances feel shorter, connections more immediate. And yet beneath this efficiency there remains a quiet question. How much of the past is carried forward and how much is left behind? You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels slightly warmer. Here, perhaps from the activity, perhaps from the materials themselves, absorbing the day's heat. As you continue walking, you begin to understand that this period represents a shift not just in structure but in perspective. A movement towards shaping the future intentionally rather than simply adapting to change as it comes. The road stretches ahead, smooth and certain, guiding you forward into the next phase of the journey. And as you follow it, you carry with you the sense that this transformation, steady and deliberate, will play a crucial role in shaping how this land interacts with the wider world in the years to come. You continue along the road, and after some time, the smooth certainty of the path begins to feel less stable than before. Not in its surface, which remains firm beneath your feet, but in the atmosphere around it. The air feels heavier, carrying a quiet weight that settles gently into your awareness. The land itself appears familiar, yet the movement within it has changed. There are more figures along the road now, but their presence feels different. Less about routine, more about necessity. Their pace is steady, but there is a quiet urgency beneath it, something unspoken yet widely understood. As you walk, you begin to notice signs of wider disturbance. Not chaos, not noise, but subtle indicators. Supplies being transported more frequently, groups moving together with shared purpose. Structures that seem to serve temporary needs rather than long-term settlement. To understand this moment, you are stepping into the period of the Second World War, when global conflict extended its reach into Iran. In 1941, Allied forces, primarily British and Soviet, occupied the country, securing supply routes and limiting the influence of Axis powers. You come across a wide stretch of road where movement has clearly increased. Tracks mark the ground, layered and overlapping. The scent of fuel lingers faintly in the air, blending with the familiar dryness of the land. One well-established detail is that Iran became a crucial corridor for transporting supplies to the Soviet Union, often referred to as the Persian Corridor. This role placed the country at the center of logistical efforts that extended far beyond its borders. You pause near the edge of the road, watching as a group passes by. Their clothing, their equipment, their posture all reflect a different purpose. Their movements are coordinated, efficient, shaped by training and necessity. And you might find yourself wondering how such global events were experienced at the local level. Did people see this as a temporary disruption or as something that would leave lasting marks on their lives? Some observers of this period have noted that the presence of foreign forces introduced both challenges and changes, influencing infrastructure, economy, and daily routines. Others emphasize how communities adapted quietly, continuing their lives within the shifting conditions. You continue walking, the sound of distant engines, faint but persistent, blending into the background of the night. It is not loud, not overwhelming, but it changes the rhythm of the environment. A detail that often goes unnoticed is how the occupation led to improvements in transportation. infrastructure, particularly roads and railways, as they were essential for moving supplies. These developments, while driven by external needs, had lasting effects on the country's connectivity. You pass a small settlement where lights burn a little brighter than before. Activity continues even at this late hour, people moving in and out of buildings, their actions purposeful but controlled. The air carries a mix of scents, fuel dust and something warm from within the homes. It creates a layered atmosphere, one that reflects both the ordinary and the extraordinary happening at the same time. Today, when we think of global conflict, we often imagine distant battlefields or dramatic events, but here it feels quieter, more integrated into daily life. Change arrives not as a single moment, but as a series of adjustments that people must navigate carefully. You notice how conversations in the settlement are shorter, more focused. People speak softly but with intent. There is a shared awareness that the world beyond their immediate surroundings is in motion. Some scholars have explored how this period influenced Iran's later relationship with foreign powers, suggesting that the experience of occupation contributed to a growing sensitivity toward external involvement. Others point out that the impact varied widely across different regions and communities. You step away from the settlement, returning to the road. The night feels cooler now, though the sense of weight remains. It is not overwhelming, but it is present like a quiet reminder that larger forces are at work. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels slightly thicker, carrying traces of movement and change. And as you continue walking, you begin to understand that this moment represents another layer in the long history you are moving through. A layer where global events intersect with local experience, shaping perspectives in ways that will continue to unfold. The road stretches ahead, steady as always, but now it carries the imprint of something larger, and you follow it step by step into a world where distant conflicts leave quiet marks on the land, and where those marks will influence how this place sees itself and others in the years to come. You continue along the road, and gradually the distant hum of wartime movement begins to fade into the background. The air feels lighter again, though not entirely at ease. There is a lingering sense of transition, as if the land itself is adjusting to what has just passed through it. The path beneath your feet remains steady, but the atmosphere has changed. The urgency you sensed before has softened into something more reflective. The kind of quiet that follows a long period of disruption, where people begin to take stock of what remains and what might come next. As you walk, you begin to notice gatherings once again, but they feel different from earlier ones. There is a renewed energy here, not hurried but focused. Conversations seem to carry a sense of direction, as if people are thinking not only about the present but about the future in a more deliberate way. To understand this moment, you are entering the early 1950s, a time when Iran experienced a powerful wave of national pride centered around control of its own resources. In 1951, Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh moved to nationalize the country's oil industry, aiming to place it under Iranian control rather than foreign management. You approach a modest building where a group has gathered. The space is simple but filled with quiet intensity. Papers are spread across a table, voices low but steady, each person contributing in measured tones. A firmly established point is that the nationalization of oil was widely supported by many within Iran, seen as a step toward economic independence and sovereignty. It represented not just a policy decision, but a statement about ownership and identity. You take a seat near the edge, observing the discussion. There is no chaos here, no raised voices. Instead, there is a careful exchange of ideas, each one considered before being spoken. And you might find yourself wondering what it felt like to be part of such a moment. To believe that change was not only possible, but within reach. Some analysts suggest that this period reflected a broader desire for self-determination shaped by earlier experiences of foreign influence and control. Others note that the situation was complex, involving both internal dynamics and external pressures that would soon become more visible. You notice how one person traces a line across a document, pausing before speaking again. The act feels deliberate, as if each decision carries weight beyond the room. A detail that often receives less attention is how ordinary citizens participated in this period, through demonstrations, discussions, and public support, creating a sense of collective involvement in shaping the nation's direction. You glance toward a nearby window where faint light filters through. Outside, the night remains calm, but within this space there is a quiet sense of movement, of ideas taking shape. The air carries the scent of paper, ink, and warm oil from the lamps. It feels familiar, grounding, yet the energy within the room adds a new layer. Today, discussions about national resources often take place within formal systems guided by complex agreements and global markets. But here the conversation feels more immediate, more connected to identity and purpose. You listen as the discussion shifts slightly, moving from ideals to practical concerns, implementation response, possible outcomes. The tone remains calm, but the awareness of what lies ahead is present. Some researchers have examined how this moment influenced long-term perceptions of fairness and external involvement, suggesting that it strengthened a sense of caution toward foreign influence. Others emphasize that the outcome of these efforts would soon introduce new complexities. You stand slowly, stepping back from the gathering. The room remains filled with quiet determination, its atmosphere steady and focused. As you return to the road, the cool night air meets you once more, carrying only the faintest traces of the discussion behind you. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels balanced again, though the sense of possibility lingers gently. And as you continue walking, you begin to understand that this moment represents a turning point shaped from within, a movement not imposed but shown. The road stretches ahead, calm and certain, guiding you forward into what comes next. And you follow it step by step, carrying with you the quiet sense that hope, like history, often unfolds in measured, thoughtful ways. You continue along the road, and as the quiet determination of that gathering fades behind you, the air begins to change once more. The stillness remains, but it feels more fragile now, as if something beneath the surface has shifted in a way that is not immediately visible. The path beneath your feet is steady, yet your awareness of it deepens. Each step feels slightly more deliberate, as though the journey itself has entered a moment where direction matters more than distance. The land around you appears calm at first glance. Small lights glow in the distance, and the faint sounds of daily life continue as they always have. But as you move forward, you begin to sense a subtle tension, not loud or disruptive, but present in the way people move, in the way conversations pause and resume with care. To understand this moment, you are stepping into the events of 1953, when a significant political shift took place. Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was removed from power in a coup that involved both internal forces and external support, including intelligence agencies from the United States and Britain. You approach a quiet street where a few individuals stand in small groups. Their voices are low, their expressions thoughtful. No one speaks loudly. The atmosphere carries a sense of uncertainty, as if people are trying to understand what has just happened and what it might mean. A well-documented element of this event is that the coup restored greater authority to the Shah, altering the direction of Iran's political development. It marked a moment when internal aspirations and external influence intersected in a way that would leave lasting impressions. You pause as near the edge of the street, observing the stillness. There is no visible chaos, no immediate sign of upheaval, yet the feeling is unmistakable. Something has changed. And you might find yourself wondering how such a moment is experienced on a personal level. Not as a headline, not as a historical summary, but as a quiet shift in the rhythm of everyday life. Some historians suggest that the events of 1953 contributed to a growing sense of mistrust toward foreign involvement, shaping perceptions that would carry forward into later decades. Others note that reactions varied, with different groups interpreting the moment through their own perspectives and experiences. You notice how one person glances toward another before speaking, as if weighing their words carefully. The conversation that follows is brief, measured, and then fades into silence. A detail that is sometimes overlooked is how quickly information moved through informal networks during this time. Without modern communication tools, news still spread from person to person, shaping understanding in ways that were both immediate and incomplete. You continue walking, the sound of your footsteps soft against the ground. The air feels cooler now, as if the night itself has deepened. The buildings around you appear unchanged, their walls steady, their windows softly lit. Yet the meaning of these familiar spaces feels different. The same streets, the same homes, but within them thoughts are shifting, questions forming. Today, when major political events occur, they are often accompanied by constant updates, analysis, and discussion. But here, the experience is quieter, more internal. People process what has happened in their own time, in their own way. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels, still carrying only faint traces of movement. As you walk, you begin to understand that this moment introduces something that will echo forward for years to come. Not just a change in leadership, but a shift in perception, a growing awareness of how external forces can influence internal outcomes. Some researchers have explored how this event shaped long-term attitudes toward international relationships, suggesting that it created a lasting sensitivity to issues of sovereignty and control. Others point out that its impact evolved over time, influenced by subsequent developments. You pass a small doorway where light spills gently onto the ground. Inside you hear the soft murmur of voices, a conversation unfolding quietly behind closed walls. It feels personal, reflective, as if people are trying to make sense of something that cannot be easily explained. You continue onward, the street gradually opening back into the wider road. The night stretches out before you, calm, yet carrying a subtle weight. And as you walk, you carry with you the sense that history is not only shaped by what happens, but by how it is remembered. The road remains steady beneath your feet, guiding you forward into the next chapter. And you follow it step by step as the quiet shift of this moment settles into the deeper layers of memory that will influence how this land relates to others in the years ahead. You continue along the road, and slowly the quiet uncertainty of that moment settles into something more structured. The air feels steadier now, though not entirely at ease. There is a sense of direction returning, shaped not by open discussion as before, but by decisions that feel more distant, more controlled. The path beneath your feet remains firm, but the surroundings begin to reflect a new kind of order. Buildings appear more uniform again. Roads, more organized, movement more regulated. It is not the organic flow you have seen earlier in your journey. This feels guided, shaped from above with intention and clarity. As you walk, you begin to notice signs of growing alignment with external influences. Not through obvious displays, but through subtle changes in structure and organization in the rhythm of daily life. To understand this moment, you're entering the period following the 1953 coup, when Iran and the United States developed closer political and strategic ties. This relationship influenced military, economic, and technological development in the country during the following decades. A well-established detail is that the United States provided significant support to the Shah's government, contributing to modernization efforts while also strengthening centralized authority. This partnership was seen by some as a path toward development, while others viewed it with increasing concern. You approach a larger city now, its outline visible against the night sky. Lights are more numerous here, spreading outward in patterns that suggest planning rather than gradual growth. The streets feel wider, more organized, their surfaces smoother beneath your feet. As you enter, you notice the change immediately. The air carries new scents. Fuel machinery, polished surfaces. The quiet hum of activity continues even at night, steady and controlled. People move through the streets with purpose. Their clothing reflects both traditional elements and newer styles. The blend feels intentional, though not entirely seamless. And you might find yourself wondering how people experience this period of change. Did it feel like progress, like pressures, or perhaps both at once? Some historians suggest that this era brought significant advancements in infrastructure, education, and industry, shaping Iran into a more modern state. Others note that these changes were accompanied by growing dissatisfaction among certain groups, particularly as political freedoms became more restricted. You pause near a building that stands out among the others. Its structure is larger, more formal, its design reflecting influence from outside traditions. Inside, you can hear the faint echo of voices, organized, structured, perhaps part of an institution guiding this transformation. A detail that is not always emphasized is the role of security institutions during this period, which work to maintain stability but also contribute to a sense of surveillance and control. This created a complex environment where progress and restriction existed side by side. You step back onto the street, the cool night air meeting you again. The lights around you cast soft reflections on the ground, creating a steady rhythm of brightness and shadow. Today, modernization is often associated with openness and innovation, but here it carries a different balance. Growth is present visible in the structures and systems around you, but it is accompanied by careful management, by boundaries that shape how that growth is experienced. You walk further into the city, noticing how the sounds blend together. The distant hum of machinery, the soft murmur of voices, the occasional movement of vehicles. It creates a steady background, not overwhelming but constant. Some researchers have explored how this period influenced Iran's evolving relationship with the United States, suggesting that early cooperation laid the groundwork for both partnership and later tension. Others emphasize that the relationship was shaped by shifting interests on both sides, making it difficult to define in simple terms. You pass a small group standing near the edge of the street. Their conversation is quiet, their expressions thoughtful. There is no outward sign of conflict, but there is a sense of reflection, as if people are considering what these changes mean for their lives. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels slightly warmer within the city, carrying traces of activity and energy. And as you continue walking, you begin to understand that this period represents a deepening connection with the outside world, one that brings both opportunity and complexity. The road stretches ahead, now shaped by new systems and new expectations, guiding you further into the unfolding story. And you follow it step by step as the balance between internal identity and external influence continues to evolve in quiet, steady ways. You continue deeper into the city, and as you walk, the steady hum of activity becomes part of the background, almost like a quiet rhythm you no longer need to focus on. The streets stretch ahead in long, deliberate lines, their surfaces smooth beneath your feet, reflecting faint light from lamps and distant buildings. The air feels warmer, here carrying the scent of fuel metal and something faintly sweet from nearby food stalls. It is a mixture of old and new, familiar and unfamiliar blending together in a way that feels carefully balanced, though not entirely settled. As you move forward, you begin to notice more people gathered in small clusters. Their conversations are quiet, but there is an undercurrent to them now, something more reflective, more questioning than before. To understand this moment, you are still within the era of the Shah, a time marked by ambitious modernization programs, including what became known as the White Revolution in the 1960s. These reforms aimed to transform land ownership, education and industry, bringing rapid change to Iranian society. A well-documented point is that these reforms included land redistribution, expansion of literacy programs, and increased participation of women in public life. These changes were presented as steps toward modernization and progress. You pass a row of buildings where light spills softly onto the street. Inside you can see people engaged in different activities. Some study others' work, others simply sit and talk. The variety of life feels broader now, more layered than before, and you might find yourself wondering how such rapid transformation was experienced on a personal level. Did it feel empowering, or did it create a sense of imbalance between tradition and change? Some observers of the period suggest that modernization brought new opportunities, especially in urban areas where education and employment expanded. Others point out that these changes were uneven, benefiting some groups more than others and creating new tensions within society. You pause near a small shop, its window displaying items that reflect both local craftsmanship and imported goods. The contrast is subtle but noticeable. Objects shaped by long-standing traditions sit beside those influenced by newer methods and designs. A lesser-known detail is how rural communities often experience these reforms differently from urban centres. While cities adapted more quickly to change, some rural areas faced disruption as traditional systems of land ownership were altered. You continue walking, the sound of your footsteps blending with the distant murmur of voices. The city feels alive, but not restless. There is movement, but also reflection, as if people are adjusting to a pace that has changed faster than expected. You notice a group standing near the edge of a street, their posture relaxed, but their expressions thoughtful. They speak quietly, occasionally pausing, as if considering not just what is being said, but what it means. Today, rapid change is often accompanied by constant communication, feedback, and adaptation. But here the process feels more internal. People experience change in their daily lives and only later find the words to describe it. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air carries both warmth and a faint dryness. The night feels steady but layered, as if holding multiple perspectives at once. As you walk, you begin to sense a quiet contrast forming. On one side, visible progress, infrastructure, education, opportunity. On the other, a growing awareness that not all voices are equally heard, not all experiences equally represented. Researchers have examined how this period contributed to rising dissatisfaction among certain segments of the population, suggesting that rapid modernization combined with political restriction created conditions that would later lead to significant change. Others note that many people continue to support aspects of these reforms, seeing them as necessary steps forward. You pass another building, its structure modern, in design, its interior brightly lit. The sound of activity inside is steady, organized, purposeful. It reflects a system that is functioning, moving forward with confidence. And yet outside the conversations remain quiet, thoughtful, sometimes uncertain. You continue walking the road, stretching ahead, its direction clear, but its meaning more complex. And as you move forward, you begin to understand that this period is not defined by a single experience. It is shaped by contrast, by the coexistence of progress and questioning of opportunity and tension of movement and reflection. The path beneath your feet remains steady, guiding you onward, and you follow it step by step, carrying with you the sense that beneath the surface of visible change, something deeper is beginning to take shape, something that will soon find its voice. You continue along the road, and as you move beyond the brighter parts of the city, the light begins to soften again. The streets grow quieter, though not empty. There are still people here, still movement, but it feels more inward now, less visible, as if much of what matters is happening beneath the surface rather than out in the open. The air cools slightly, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and distant cooking fires. The hum of machinery fades, replaced by quieter sounds. Footsteps, low conversations, the occasional creak of a door opening and closing somewhere nearby. As you walk, you begin to notice something subtle but persistent. The way people pause before speaking, the way conversations lower in tone when others pass by. It is not fear, not exactly, but a kind of carefulness, a sense that not everything is meant to be said aloud. To understand this moment, you are still within the later years of the Shah's rule, when modernization had advanced significantly, but so had dissatisfaction among various groups. Economic changes, political restrictions, and cultural tensions had begun to create a quiet but growing unease. One clearly documented aspect of this period is the role of state security institutions, particularly SAVAK, which monitored political activity and dissent. Its presence contributed to an atmosphere where people became more cautious in expressing their views openly. You walk past a narrow street where a few individuals stand close together, speaking softly. Their words are not clear, but their tone suggests trust, familiarity. These are conversations meant to remain within small circles shared carefully rather than broadly, and you might find yourself wondering how such an atmosphere shapes daily life, how it influences not only what people say, but what they think, what they choose to question, and what they choose to leave unspoken. Some observers of this time suggest that this quiet restraint created a kind of internal pressure where ideas and frustrations continue to build beneath the surface. Others note that many people adapted to these conditions, focusing on their personal lives and navigating the boundaries as best they could. You pause near a doorway where faint light spills onto the ground. Inside, a family sits together, their voices soft, their movements calm. The scene feels ordinary, comforting even, and yet the outside world presses gently against it, shaping the context in which this quiet moment exists. A detail that is not always highlighted is how cultural expression continued during this period, often finding subtle ways to reflect deeper thoughts. Through literature, art and conversation, ideas could still move even if they were not always spoken directly. You continue walking the cool air, brushing lightly against your face. The city feels calmer here, but the calm carries weight. It is not the ease of earlier moments in your journey. It is something more layered, more aware. Today we often think of expression as something immediate and visible shared openly across platforms and spaces, but here expression becomes more careful, more intentional. It moves quietly, finding its way through trusted paths rather than public ones. You notice how the buildings around you seem unchanged, their walls steady, their windows softly lit. Yet within them, thoughts are forming question, growing perspectives, shifting. Some researchers have explored how this period of quiet tension contributed to later events, suggesting that when change eventually came, it was shaped by ideas that had been developing over time. Others emphasize that such processes are complex, influenced by many factors rather than a single cause. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels, still carrying only the faintest traces of sound. And as you continue walking, you begin to understand that not all change is visible. Some of it unfolds quietly in private conversations, in personal reflections, in moments where people begin to see their world differently. The road stretches ahead, calm and steady, though the atmosphere around it feels deeper now, more reflective. And you follow it step by step, carrying with you the quiet awareness that beneath the surface of everyday life, something is slowly building. Not loudly, not suddenly, but steadily preparing to emerge when the moment arrives. You continue along the road, and as you move forward, the quiet restraint you felt before begins to shift. Not suddenly, not all at once, but in a way that feels like a slow release. The air seems to carry more sound now, not loud, but present. Conversations no longer fade as quickly when others pass. Movements feel more purposeful, more visible. The path beneath your feet remains steady, but the atmosphere has changed. There is a sense of gathering, of something forming across many small moments that are beginning to align. As you walk, you begin to notice larger groups appearing along the streets. People stand closer together. Now their voices still controlled but no longer confined to private spaces. The energy feels different, focused, shared, and quietly determined. To understand this moment, you are stepping into the late 1970s when widespread dissatisfaction with the Shah's rule began to surface more openly. Protests, demonstrations, and public expressions of concern grew in both size and frequency, reflecting a broad range of perspectives and motivations. A well-documented point is that these movements brought together different segments of society, including students, religious groups, and others, creating a diverse but unified momentum for change. You pause near a wide street where a group has gathered. The air carries a low murmur of voices, steady and rhythmic. There is no chaos here, no sudden movement. Instead, there is a collective presence, people standing together, sharing space and intention. And you might find yourself wondering how such a shift takes place, how quiet conversations turn into shared expression, how individual thoughts become part of something larger. Some observers of this period suggest that the accumulation of economic concerns, political restrictions, and cultural tensions contributed to this moment. Others emphasize the role of leadership and organization in shaping how these movements unfolded. You stand at the edge of the gathering, feeling the subtle warmth of bodies close together, the soft movement of air as people shift slightly, adjusting their position. The sound of voices rises and falls gently, creating a steady rhythm that feels almost like breathing. A detail that is sometimes overlooked is how these gatherings often maintained a sense of order even as their size increased. People moved with awareness, with an understanding of shared purpose rather than disorder. You notice a person near the center speaking, their tone calm but firm. Others listen closely, their attention focused. There is a sense of connection here, not just between individuals but between ideas. The air carries the faint scent of dust mixed with something warmer, perhaps from nearby homes or food carried along the way. It feels familiar, grounding, even as the moment itself carries weight. Today, large gatherings are often accompanied by immediate coverage, constant updates, and widespread visibility. But here, the experience is more direct, more personal. People are present, fully engaged, experiencing the moment together rather than through a distance. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels fuller, shaped by the presence of many people. As you watch, you begin to sense that this is not just a single event, but part of a broader shift. A movement that has been building quietly, now finding expression in shared space. Researchers have explored how these early stages of public demonstration set the tone for what would follow, suggesting that the calm but determined nature of these gatherings helps sustain momentum over time. Others note that such movements are rarely uniform, shaped by many voices and perspectives. You remain for a moment longer, observing the flow of people, the steady rhythm of voices, the sense of connection that fills the space. Then slowly you step back, returning to the edge of the road. The gathering continues behind you, its presence steady and persistent. As you walk onward, the sound of voices follows you for a time, gradually fading into the distance. And as it does, you begin to understand that something has shifted in a way that cannot easily be reversed. The road stretches ahead calm as always, but the world round it is no longer quiet in the same way. And you follow it step by step, carrying with you the awareness that when many voices begin to move together, even gently, they can reshape the direction of history in ways that unfold slowly but with lasting effect. You continue along the road, and as the sound of the gathering fades behind you, the atmosphere shifts once again. The energy that had begun to rise now settles into something more defined, more structured. It is no longer only about expression, but about transformation. The air feels clearer, cooler, as if the night itself has deepened. The path beneath your feet remains steady, yet the world around it feels newly arranged, as though the familiar has been reshaped into something that is still being understood. As you walk, you begin to notice changes in the surroundings. The same streets, the same buildings, but the way people move through them feels different. There is a sense of purpose that is both calm and firm, as if a new direction has been accepted even if its full meaning is not yet clear. To understand this moment, you are entering the period of the Iranian Revolution of 1979, when the existing political structure was replaced and a new system of governance was established. The monarchy came to an end and a new Islamic republic was formed, guided by religious leadership and new institutional frameworks. A clearly established fact is that Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini became a central figure in this transformation, shaping the direction of the new government and its guiding principles. You walk through a street where people gather in smaller groups, now their conversations quieter than before but still purposeful. There's no longer the same rising momentum you felt earlier. Instead, there is a sense of adjustment, of people beginning to understand what this new reality means for their lives. And you might find yourself wondering how such a profound shift is absorbed by society, how people move from anticipation into acceptance, from movement into structure. Some analysts suggest that the revolution brought a sense of renewed identity rooted in cultural and religious values that many felt had been overlooked. Others note that the transition also introduced new complexities as different expectations and interpretations began to shape the evolving system. You pause near a building where a small group is gathered, speaking in calm, measured tones. Their words carry a sense of reflection, as if they are considering not just what has changed, but how to move forward within it. A detail that is sometimes less emphasized is how quickly everyday life continues even after major transformations. Shops open, families gather, routines resume, though often with subtle differences that reflect the new environment. You notice a door open briefly, warm light spilling onto the ground. Inside you glimpse a quiet scene, people sitting together, their voices soft, their movements familiar. Life continues even as its framework shifts. The air carries the faint scent of cooking food mixed with the coolness of the night. It feels grounding, steady, a reminder that change does not erase the rhythms of daily life. Today, when we think of major political change, we often imagine clear divisions between before and after. But here the transition feels more layered. The past remains present even as the future begins to take shape. You continue walking, noticing how the city feels both familiar and new at the same time. The structures are the same, but their meaning has shifted, shaped by new expectations and new interpretations. Some researchers have explored how the revolution influenced Iran's long-term relationships with other countries, suggesting that it marked a turning point in how the nation positioned itself on the global stage. Others emphasize that such relationships continue to evolve, shaped by ongoing developments. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels, still carrying only the faintest traces of sound. And as you walk, you begin to understand that this moment represents not an end, but a beginning. A new framework, still forming, still adapting, still being defined through everyday experience. The road stretches ahead calm and steady, guiding you forward into this new phase of the journey. And you follow it step by step, carrying with you the quiet awareness that transformation, even when it feels complete, continues to unfold long after the moment itself has passed. You continue along the road, and as the new order settles quietly into place, the atmosphere shifts once again. The sense of internal adjustment remains, but now it begins to extend outward, beyond the streets and buildings around you. The air feels slightly sharper, carrying a subtle awareness of the wider world, as if attention is no longer only inward, but also directed toward distant horizons. The path beneath your feet remains steady, but the feeling of isolation has faded. You are no longer walking through a space that exists on its own. This place is now firmly connected to larger global currents, and those currents are beginning to shape its direction in visible ways. As you walk, you begin to notice small groups gathered in discussion once more. Their voices are calm, but there is a new tone within them. Not uncertainty, not quite reflection, but conviction. The kind that comes from a clearer sense of identity and purpose. To understand this moment, you are stepping into the period immediately following the 1979 revolution, when Iran's relationship with the United States shifted dramatically. What had once been a close partnership became a relationship defined by mistrust and tension. A firmly established detail is that in 1979 the US Embassy in Tehran was taken over by a group of Iranian students, leading to a hostage crisis that lasted over a year. This event became a defining moment in how the two countries viewed one another. You approach a quiet street where the walls are marked with new symbols and expressions. They are not chaotic or random, but intentional, reflecting ideas that have taken shape in the wake of recent events. You pause, observing the space. The air carries a faint scent of dust and paint mixed with the coolness of the night. There is no noise here, but the silence feels meaningful, as if it holds the echo of something that has already occurred. And you might find yourself wondering how such a rapid shift into relationships is understood by those living through it. How a connection built over years transforms into distance, into opposition. Some observers suggest that the events of this period reinforced a desire for independence from foreign influence, shaping a new direction in foreign policy. Others note that the situation was shaped by multiple perspectives, each interpreting the moment through its own experience and priorities. You continue walking the street, opening into a wider space where a few individuals stand in quiet conversation. Their posture is steady, their expressions thoughtful. The tone of their voices suggests certainty, but also awareness of complexity. A detail that is sometimes overlooked is how quickly symbols and language can change during moments like this. Words take on new meanings, familiar terms are redefined, and the way people describe their world begins to shift. You notice how the environment reflects this transformation. The same buildings, the same roads, but the context in which they exist has altered. The connections that once shaped the vein have been re-examined, redefined. Today, international relationships often feel distant, shaped by policies and decisions made far from everyday life. But here the impact feels immediate. It is present in conversations, in expressions, in the way people understand their place in the world. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels cooler now, carrying a faint stillness that contrasts with the weight of the moment. As you walk, you begin to understand that this shift is not only about politics, it is about perception, about how a nation sees itself and how it chooses to relate to others. Some researchers have explored how this period shaped long-term attitudes toward the United States, suggesting that the events create a lasting framework of suspicion and distance. Others emphasize that relationships are always evolving, influenced by new developments over time. You pass a doorway where a small light glows softly. Inside, you hear the quiet murmur of voices, calm and steady. Life continues even as the broader context changes. You continue onward, the road stretching ahead steady as always, and as you walk, you carry with you the understanding that relationships between nations are not fixed. They shift, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly, shaped by moments that leave lasting impressions. The path remains calm beneath your feet, guiding you forward into the next chapter. and you follow it step by step as the echoes of this transformation settle into the deeper layers of memory and identity that will influence what comes next. You continue along the road, and as the echoes of that shifting relationship settle behind you, the horizon begins to feel wider again. Not quieter, but broader. The sense of connection now stretches beyond a single direction, expanding into a region filled with its own history, its own tensions, its own quiet patterns of interaction. The air feels slightly drier here, carrying a faint warmth even as the night deepens. The ground beneath your feet remains steady, though the landscape around you seems more open, less contained. It is as if the path itself is leading you outward toward a larger context that cannot be understood from one place alone. As you walk, you begin to notice new references and conversation, new points of focus that extend beyond the familiar paths you have travelled so far. The voices you hear speak of neighbouring lands, of shifting alliances, of concerns that move across borders rather than remaining within them. To understand this moment, you are stepping into the evolving relationship between Iran and Israel, a connection that has changed significantly over time. Before the 1979 revolution, Iran and Israel maintained a level of cooperation, particularly in areas such as trade and security. After the revolution, this relationship shifted into one of opposition, shaped by ideological and regional factors. A well-established detail is that prior to 1979, Iran was one of the few countries in the region that maintained informal ties with Israel, reflecting a different geopolitical landscape than what would later emerge. You come across a quiet gathering where a few individuals sit together, their discussion focused and measured. Maps are spread before them, simple but detailed, marking regions' borders and pathways that extend far beyond where you stand. You pause at a distance, observing. The tone of the conversation is calm but attentive. Each person speaks with care, as if aware that the subjects they are discussing carry weight beyond the immediate moment. And you might find yourself wondering how relationships between nations are shaped not only by direct interaction, but by the broader environment in which they exist. How regional dynamics influence decisions, how identity and perspective guide interpretation. Some analysts suggest that Iran's stance toward Israel after the revolution became closely tied to ideological principles and support for certain regional positions. Others point out that these dynamics are also influenced by strategic considerations evolving over time as conditions change. You notice how one person traces a line across the map following a route that connects multiple regions. The gesture feels deliberate, reflecting the interconnected nature of the world you are observing. A detail that is sometimes less emphasized is how indirect relationships often play a significant role in shaping international perspectives. Countries may not interact directly, yet their policies and positions influence one another through shared regional concerns. You step closer, noticing how the map itself is worn in places its surface marked by repeated use. It reflects not just geography, but ongoing attention, continuous adjustment, and careful consideration. The air carries the faint scent of paper and dust mixed with the coolness of the night. It feels calm but focused, as if the space itself is dedicated to understanding rather than immediate action. Today, global relationships are often discussed in clear terms, alliances and oppositions defined through statements and agreements, but here the process feels more layered. Positions are shaped by history, by identity, by experiences that extend far beyond the present moment. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels steady, carrying only the quiet presence of the discussion before you. As you watch, you begin to understand that this relationship is not defined by a single event, but by a series of shifts, each one building upon what came before. Some researchers have explored how historical experiences, including earlier interactions with foreign powers, influenced Iran's evolving perspective in the region. Others emphasize that contemporary dynamics continue to reshape these relationships in ways that remain fluid and complex. After a while, the gathering begins to quiet. The maps are carefully folded, the conversation softens, and people begin to rise slowly, carrying their thoughts with them. You step back, returning to the road. The wider landscape stretches out before you, calm yet expansive. And as you continue walking, you begin to see how the story you're following is no longer confined to a single path. It extends outward, connecting to a broader network of relationships, each shaped by its own history, yet all intertwined. The road remains steady beneath your feet, guiding you forward, and you follow it step by step as the understanding of this wider perspective settles gently into place, revealing how regional dynamics shape connections in ways that are both visible and deeply rooted. You continue along the road, and as the wider map of the region settles quietly into your awareness, the atmosphere begins to feel more focused again. Not narrower, but more intentional. The openness of the landscape remains, yet there is a sense that each movement now carries deeper meaning, shaped by both belief and experience. The air feels still, almost contemplative. The ground beneath your feet remains firm, but the rhythm of your steps slows slightly, as if the journey itself is inviting you to reflect more carefully on what you have seen so far. As you walk, you begin to notice fewer large gatherings and more small, deliberate conversations. People speak in calm tones, their words measured, their expressions thoughtful. The energy here is not driven by urgency, but by understanding. To understand this moment, you are moving into the way ideology and security concerns have come to shape Iran's foreign policy in the decades following the revolution. These are not abstract ideas, but lived perspectives influenced by history, identity, and the experiences you have already walked through. One clearly established point is that Iran's foreign policy has often emphasized independence from external influence, reflecting lessons drawn from earlier periods of intervention and control. This approach has influenced its stance toward both regional and global actors. You come across a quiet space where a few individuals sit together not around a fire or a table, but simply on the ground, speaking softly. There are no maps here, no visible documents, just conversation steady and reflective. You pause nearby, listening without interrupting. The tone is calm, but there is depth to it, as if each word carries layers of meaning built over time. And you might find yourself wondering how ideas like independence and security are shaped. Are they reactions to specific events, or do they grow gradually shaped by generations of experience? Some analysts suggest that Iran's emphasis on self-reliance is deeply connected to historical memories of foreign involvement, creating a perspective that values caution in external relationships. Others note that strategic considerations, including regional dynamics and security concerns, also play a significant role in shaping policy decisions. You notice how one person pauses before speaking, taking a moment as if to choose their words carefully. The conversation moves slowly, each idea given space to settle. A detail that is not always highlighted is how these broader policies are often discussed in everyday terms through conversations like this, where people interpret and understand them in relation to their own lives. The air carries a faint coolness now mixed with the subtle scent of dust and distant stone. It feels grounding, steady, as if the environment itself supports this quiet reflection. Today, discussions about foreign policy often take place in formal settings, shaped by official language and structured communication. But here the understanding of those policies feels more personal, more connected to lived experience. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels calm and still, allowing each thought to settle without interruption. As you listen, you begin to understand that ideology is not simply a set of ideas imposed from above. It is something that takes shape through interpretation, through conversation, through the gradual process of making sense of the world. Some researchers have explored how Iran's approach to security has been influenced by both historical experiences and contemporary challenges, suggesting that these perspectives continue to evolve over time. Others emphasize that no single explanation fully captures the complexity of these decisions. After a while, the conversation begins to soften, the voices fading into quiet pauses. The group remains seated, but the intensity of the discussion eases, giving way to a more reflective stillness. You step back, gently returning to the road. The landscape around you feels calm, but now you understand that beneath that calm lies a network of ideas carefully considered and continuously shaped. The path stretches ahead, steady and patient, guiding you forward once more. And as you walk, you carry with you the quiet understanding that the way a nation sees the world is shaped not only by events, but by the meanings attached to those events over time. The road remains unchanged beneath your feet, yet your awareness of it has deepened, and you follow it step by step as the balance between belief, experience, and security continues to guide the direction of the journey ahead. You continue along the road, and as the quiet reflections of that conversation fade behind you, the night seems to deepen once more. The air feels still, almost suspended, as if holding many layers of memory at once. The path beneath your feet remains steady, familiar, yet the meaning of the journey has grown richer with each step you have taken. The land stretches wide around you, open and calm, but now it feels filled with echoes. Not sounds you can clearly hear, but impressions. Moments from earlier in your walk, the firelight, the quiet gatherings, the shifting streets, all resting gently in your awareness. As you walk, you begin to notice how the present moment feels connected to all those that came before it. The road is the same, yet it carries the imprint of centuries, each layer of history still present in subtle ways, shaping what you see, what you feel, and what you understand. To understand this moment, you are stepping into the present day, where Iran's relationships with countries like the United States and Israel are influenced by the long history you have just travelled through. These relationships are not defined by a single event, but by accumulated experiences, interpretations, and memories. A widely accepted observation is that historical events such as the 1953 coup and the 1979 revolution continue to influence how Iran perceives external powers, the shaping attitudes that persist over time. You come across a quiet open space where a few individuals sit not in discussion but in reflection. There are no documents, no maps, no visible signs of planning, just stillness shared quietly among those present. You pause nearby, feeling the calm settle around you. The air carries a faint coolness mixed with the subtle scent of earth and distant night air. It feels grounding, almost timeless, and you might find yourself wondering how memory shapes perception. How events experienced or remembered across generations influence the way a nation understands its place in the world. Some analysts suggest that collective memory plays a powerful role in shaping foreign policy, guiding decisions in ways that reflect past experiences. Others note that contemporary realities also influence these perspectives, creating a balance between history and present conditions. You notice how one person gazes outward at their expression calm but thoughtful, as if considering something far beyond the immediate surroundings. The silence here is not empty. It is filled with awareness, with reflection. A detail that is often understated is how everyday life continues alongside these larger dynamics. People work, gather rest, and live their lives within the context of these ongoing relationships, often without directly engaging with their full complexity. The air feels cooler now, brushing gently against your skin. The night stretches above you, the stars steady and unchanged, just as they were at the beginning of your journey. Today, international relations are often discussed in terms of strategy and policy, but here you begin to see them as something more layered, as reflections of history, identity, and the ways in which past experiences continue to shape present understanding. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels calm and balanced, carrying only the quiet presence of the moment. As you stand there, you begin to understand that the story you have been walking through is not fixed. It continues to evolve, shaped by new experiences, new interpretations, and new connections. Some researchers have explored how younger generations interpret these relationships differently, influenced by both inherited perspectives and contemporary experiences. Others emphasize that continuity remains strong, with historical narratives continuing to guide understanding. You step forward again, returning to the path. The road remains steady, unchanged in its form, yet deeply changed in its meaning. And as you walk, you carry with you the quiet awareness that history is not something left behind. It moves with you, shaping how each new moment is understood. The path stretches ahead, calm and certain, guiding you forward into the final stages of the journey. And you follow it step by step as the echoes of the past settle gently into the present, forming a continuous thread that connects what is, and what may yet come. You continue along the road, and as the vast sweep of history settles gently into the background, your attention begins to return to something closer, something more immediate. The wide perspective of nations and relationships softens, and the focus narrows to the quiet rhythm of everyday life. The air feels calm and familiar now, carrying the subtle scent of cooking fabric and the faint dust of well-travelled paths. The ground beneath your feet remains steady, unchanged, Yet the meaning of each step feels different. You are no longer simply observing history from a distance. You are moving through the lives of those who carry it forward. As you walk, you begin to notice small scenes unfolding around you. A doorway left slightly open, warm light spilling onto the ground. The soft sound of voices inside, steady and reassuring. A figure walking slowly along the path, their steps unhurried, as if the night itself invites patience. To understand this moment, it helps to recognize that while international relationships shape the broader context, daily life continues with its own steady rhythm. People wake, work, gather and rest, carrying both the weight and the familiarity of their environment without always focusing on its larger meaning. One widely observed reality is that despite ongoing political tensions, everyday life in Iran continues to be shaped by family, community, education and work, much like in any other part of the world. These routines create stability even when the broader environment feels complex. You pass by a small home where a family sits together. Their conversation is soft, their movements relaxed. The light inside flickers gently, casting warm shadows against the walls. It is a simple scene, but it carries a quiet sense of continuity, and you might find yourself wondering how people balance these two layers of experience. The larger world of international relationships and the immediate world of daily life. Some observers suggest that individuals often navigate these layers by focusing on what is closest to them, maintaining a sense of normalcy even when external conditions shift. Others note that awareness of the broader context still influences perspective, even if it is not always at the forefront of daily thought. You continue walking, noticing how the sounds around you feel softer now. The distant hum of activity has faded, replaced by quieter rhythms, footsteps, low voices, the occasional movement of a door or window. A detail that is sometimes overlooked is how cultural traditions continue to play a strong role in everyday life, providing a sense of identity and continuity that remains steady even as external relationships evolve. You pause near a small courtyard where a few individuals sit in quiet conversation. There is no urgency here, no sense of pressure. Just the steady presence of shared time. The air carries a gentle warmth mixed with the faint coolness of the night. It feels balanced, steady, as if the world has found a moment of rest. Today it is easy to focus on the larger narratives, the relationships between countries, the policies, the tensions, but here you are reminded that life continues in smaller, quieter ways, in conversations, in routines, in moments that do not appear in headlines, but shape experience nonetheless. You take a slow breath, noticing how the air feels calm and grounding. As you walk, you begin to understand that these everyday moments are just as much a part of the story as the larger events you have seen. They provide context, continuity and meaning, anchoring the broader narrative in lived experience. Some researchers have explored how public perception of international relationships is shaped not only by major events, but also by daily interactions, media and personal experience. Others emphasize that individual perspectives can vary widely, reflecting different backgrounds and viewpoints. You step forward again, the path stretching ahead, calm and familiar, and as you continue, you carry with you the quiet understanding that history is not only something that shapes nations, it is something that lives within people, carried forward through everyday life in ways that are both visible and subtle. The road remains steady beneath your feet, guiding you toward the final part of your journey. And you follow it step by step as the quiet rhythm of daily life settles gently into place, offering a sense of continuity that balances the complexity of the world beyond. You continue along the road, and as you move forward, everything begins to soften. The sounds you have been following, the distant voices, the faint hum of movement, all gradually fade into a quiet stillness that feels familiar and comforting. The air is cool now, steady and calm, carrying only the faintest scent of earth and night. The path beneath your feet remains unchanged, yet it feels lighter somehow, as if the weight of all those moments you have walked through has settled gently into place. You notice how the land stretches out before you, open and peaceful. There are no crowds here, no gatherings, no structures demanding your attention, just the quiet presence of the road and the vast sky above it. And as you walk, you begin to sense how everything you have seen connects. The early empires, the careful roads, the blending of cultures, the quiet resilience through change, the moments of connection, the moments of tension, the shifts in direction that shaped relationships with distant lands. One thing becomes clear as you reflect. Iran's relationship with countries like the United States and Israel is not the result of a single decision or event. It is shaped by centuries of experience, by patterns of interaction, by memories carried forward through time. You slow your pace slightly, allowing each step to settle more fully, and you might find yourself wondering how history continues to shape the present in ways that are not always visible. How decisions made long ago still echo quietly in the way people see the world today. Many who study this subject point out that perspectives are formed not only through events, but through interpretation. Through the stories people tell, the meanings they attach, and the ways those meanings are passed from one generation to the next. You pause for a moment, looking out across the open land. The night sky stretches above you clear and steady, just as it was when you first began this journey. The stars remain unchanged, silent witnesses to everything that has unfolded below. A small, often overlooked observation comes to mind. Despite all the changes you have walked through, the rhythm of life continues. People still gather, still speak, still move through their days and nights with quiet intention. You take a slow breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs, then gently release. Today it is easy to think of the world in terms of divisions of relationships defined by tension or agreement. But as you have seen, those relationships are layered, shaped by time, by memory, by countless moments that do not always appear in simple explanations. You begin to walk again, though more slowly now, your steps softer, your awareness more at ease. Some observers suggest that understanding these relationships requires patience, a willingness to look beyond individual events and see the broader patterns that connect them. Others note that each generation brings new interpretations, adding to the story rather than replacing it. The road ahead remains calm, gently fading into the distance. There is no urgency now, no need to move quickly. The journey itself feels complete, not because it has ended, but because it has settled into something quiet and whole. You notice how the air feels cooler still, the night deepening into a soft, steady silence. The world around you seems to slow, inviting you to rest, to let the thoughts you have gathered drift gently into stillness. And as you stand there, you realize that history is not something distant. It is something that moves with you, shaping how the present is understood, quietly influencing what comes next. You take one final slow breath, letting it out gently. The road fades softly into the darkness, the stars above remaining steady, the night wrapping around you in calm and quiet. The journey settles, and everything grows still. Now allow the story to gently drift into rest. The road you have walked no longer needs to be followed. It remains behind you, steady and unchanged, holding all the moments you passed through. The early fires, the quiet roads, the layered cities, the voices that rose and softened again. All of it resting quietly without urgency. You can feel the stillness now deeper than before. The air cool and soft against your skin, the faint scent of earth grounding and calm. There is nothing more to understand, nothing more to follow. Only the gentle presence of what has already been. The night feels wide and peaceful. The sky above, filled with distant stars, remains unchanged just as it has always been. And as you stand there, you notice how your thoughts begin to slow. The details of the journey soften, blending together into something quiet and continuous. There is no need to hold on to each moment. They settle on their own like soft echoes fading into the distance. You take another slow breath, in and out. The world remains still. The road is quiet. And you are at rest within it. End of script, sweet dreams.